Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I am your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement on this lovely Wednesday, September 7th. And I'm joined by my co host, P. How goes it, P?
As always, it goes amazingly. Can you guys see me right now? I'm getting a very strange.
Oh, now you're moving. You weren't moving
Oh,
for a
man.
second.
All right, my friends, I'm in the Matrix. I've been trapped by an evil wizard who is trying to control this stream in real time. I'm going to be gone for 30 seconds to a minute, and then I will be back. But to answer your question, Q, I'm doing great. Excited to talk about what we got to talk about today and the person after this that we are going to talk to it about. Can you tell the people what they can expect while I vanish into the mist?
Yeah, hopefully the Matrix actually lets you come back to us. But in case you don't, Chris and I will hold down the fort. We got news and notes in just a moment here. We're going to be joined today by none other than Erik Cason to talk a lot more philosophy and all the things going on in our world and how Bitcoin does, in fact, fix everything. And then, of course, it is Wednesday. So we have a new episode of Fed Watch for you guys, and that'll kick off at about 3 p.m. Eastern time, noon Pacific. Ansel and CK will be back and talk all things the Fed. But without further ado, and while we wait for P to be released from the Matrix gods, let's dive into news and notes. The big story on everyone's minds, the big story that has taken up your Twitter feed, your mind, and your hearts is, in fact, the price of Bitcoin. I believe as of this moment, the price of Bitcoin is at just under $19,000 a coin. So we've seen a nice steady climb up. It hit a low of just over 18,000 last night. I made a promise to not talk about price, and here I am. And all I've said in the first 4 minutes of today's stream is nothing but price action. Look, ultimately, it doesn't matter. If all you think Bitcoin is going to do is triple from here and maybe live at 60K forever, like that's Bitcoin will live at 60K. Guess what? You can be buying from 20K all the way down to wherever its bottom is. You can buy every interval of 1,000 and it won't matter because you'll have at least tripled your money if all you think it goes to 60K. Now, whole separate conversation if you're still thinking about selling your Bitcoin for fiat, but you'll get there. I got there. I believe in you as well. Look, the general market sentiment is really tough right now. We're seeing the public equity markets contract as well. We've seen the correlation between Bitcoin's price and the NASDAQ has not yet broken, nor have we seen anything that would suggest it has broken yet. I've been banging the drum, much like Dr. Bear, that the worst is yet to come and we will have more pain. But it remains to be seen. Stay humble, take advantage of the opportunities that are there. And for the love of God, please do not be in a situation where you are a forced seller right now. Chris, any thoughts on the price? Are you stacking heavy in these times of great opportunity?
One Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. I am on the DCA plan of just, dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, through any means possible. So yeah, I'm getting more bang for my cuck bucks, basically. I think that this is the first time Bitcoin's being tested. I know one of the narratives was every time Bitcoin crashed, it stayed above its all-time high. This is the first time that narrative is being tested and eventually broke down. I think that there's a bid for dollars. Ultimately, people right now in the fiat world that we still reside in, even though we love Bitcoin, people need dollars to cover their loans, whether energy prices are going up in Europe. And there's a great saying that basically what happens in Europe is normally 2 to 3 months away for the US. I think that that's going to be true. Like there's going to come a point where maybe we're not going to have electrical bills as crazy as them, but like oil prices can start bidding up again because we're going to start shipping. It's more financially economical, makes more sense to ship oil or that we produce here in the United States over to Europe to capture the spread. Obviously, there's cost of shipping and stuff, but the market's always trying to remain in equilibrium. And as their prices are bid up, 5-6 times as high as the United States, we're going to see prices creep up here in the United States as well. So I think this is a sat stacker's paradise. Keep stacking sats by any means possible. Sell your kidney. You only need one of those. I actually had the luxury of surprising P. I know he was, away, but don't tell him this. I think he just returned. But when he was sleeping last night, I actually snuck in, did an incision with Dr. Bear, and we may or may not have taken one of his kidneys to sell in the black market. P, how are you feeling this morning? You're back.
Good. I started getting warnings that people did not want me to be heard. My computer was like, yo, you're at like 1,000,000% of your memory usage. Get fucked. And so I had to restart some shit. Yeah, I was aware. I was filming the entire thing. I saw you steal my kidney. And you didn't get my seed phrase, which is etched on the bones of my femur. So you're lost, my friend. You're fucking lost.
P, on a more serious note, I mean, obviously, Chris and Dr. Bear, I'm being completely serious. Like, I myself have now been selling sperm and blood to pay for extra sats. Like, what have you been selling in these dire times to build your stack?
Yeah. I mean, we are in a bear market, as we talk about a lot. I've just started selling the skin cells that I slough off. Humans slough off about 1 million individual skin cells every day. All of those are full of collagen and protein and can be scooped up and turned into sort of a powder that you can mix in with your food. Super tasty. I believe the WEF is actually driving forward a new initiative. They have been focused on insects, and now they're focused on human skin as a great source of nutrition. I'm excited about it.
Okay, this actually, you brought it up, and this story wasn't in our list of news and notes, but have both of you seen the trending picture of the box of pasta, protein pasta, and the protein comes from cricket? Have you guys seen this?
No, I have not.
This is like now a trending thing on Twitter. So one of two things is happening. All right. And there's no other possibility. Either the simulation is so royally glitched that whatever we say here on Bitcoin Magazine Live does come true and does come to fruition. We are better than InfoWars in that our predictions come true in 6 months or less. Or number two, which I think is more likely, quite frankly, P, our esteemed and lovely colleague, P, if you could put him on screen for just a moment so everyone can remind themselves what he looks like. Yes, that man is a fraud. And that man right there has been secretly working for the WEF this whole time. He is one of the original founding members, and I have been trying to track down. There's one person missing of the founders of the WEF, and their identity, their face, their name is scrubbed from all information on the WEF's files. And I truly believe that this man right here is in fact the missing person.
Look, these are baseless rumors. These have been disproven time and time again in court. You can't say this shit anymore, Q. The courts have decided. Absolutely not. I have nothing to do with the WEF. Fuck those people. And I've changed the title to reflect my views on the subject. Let's keep going though. We've got some exciting stories. As much as, actually, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to rant for a second. Do you realize that you're already eating insects in your food? Every single
he's starting to justify it now.
Listen. I had this amazing professor. I've told this story before. I had this amazing professor in college who it was about it was like food safety, industrial food safety, biology, medical applications. He passed around this giant Costco box of like Wheaties, or it was like nuts or some shit. Anyway, it was like, Costco snacks. And after everybody had like taken a big thing, he's like, do you know how many crickets you just ate? And then he showed the FDA rules for like how many crickets are allowed to be in food, how many mice ground up into, mouse chum, how many X, how many Y. And people love to say that insect protein is inferior. And it actually maybe, I have no fucking clue. My point is the bias against insect-based protein, simply because people saw it in that weird fucking movie, Snowpiercer. I don't understand that. I'll be honest, I don't want to fucking eat bugs. But there are lots of cultures that have eaten bugs for many, many generations, millennia, in fact, and are doing fucking great for it. And so I've heard one argument, which is like commercially raised insects are higher in, like parasites. That may or may not be true, but I just think there are some questions we have to, answer. Like, will eating bugs give me superpowers? And if so, why are you not doing it as well?
I mean, to validate what P is saying, like there is an acceptable amount of, I believe it's rat blood or it might be mice blood that is deemed acceptable
It's lemur
for
blood,
human
actually.
consumption in ketchup.
Oh yeah, even like
What?
Hershey's chocolate, it's allowed to have like 8 spiders or ants in those chocolate bars.
Yeah,
That's
again, yeah. Yes, these are all true facts. All right, let's get back to our news stories.
Fine.
This is super
Talk to us
important.
about the youths.
The youths, they're important. They are the future. And additionally, Spiral has announced they are renewing the Summer of Bitcoin internship program for the summer of 2023. They are in the process of winding down the internship for 2022. And as I said, they've already basically committed 100% to doing it again. This is a super cool project. I think that Spiral is a very interesting company because they are a for-profit commercial entity that is extremely successful. And also they are deeply committed to Bitcoin and more importantly, pushing the space forward, even in ways that don't serve their, immediate interest. And I think that's really, really admirable and amazing. I wish more companies would take would follow in their footsteps. But yeah, it's a really cool project. If you don't know enough, if you haven't heard of it, Summer of Bitcoin, I would highly suggest you look into it. It's basically an internship that's structured at, kind of like an actual summer camp. And, they pair sort of aspiring Bitcoin developers and designers with people that are extremely talented and, are Bitcoin core contributors, are contributing to LDK and Lightning, and they are focused on really kind of inspiring the next generation of Bitcoin developers. So.
Yeah, I think this is an awesome story. I know it comes off the backs of Wolf in Wolf's Clothing, or Wolf as it's called. That is the NIDIG accelerator. It's a little bit different than an internship. Obviously, these are like paid positions that Wolf's going to be doing, but I think this is really cool. And they're kind of expanding, to P's point. They're kind of doing, I don't want to say taking the Google model, because I think Google, for the longest time, they had the slogan, don't be evil. But I know in the early days of Google, they gave 20, I think it was either 10 or 20% of workers time during the week that they're working at Google to work on open source projects or just projects in general, like for code, like a lot of the coders. So this is kind of like a way that Spiral is kind of doing that by having them work on the Lightning Development Kit, or LDK, which is something that they want to open source, work in the open, to allow young developers to use this kit for creating Lightning wallets, Lightning implementations, or just various things on the Lightning network, which is really, really cool.
LDK and BDK, to be clear, are open source. They are Bitcoin Developer Kit and Lightning Development Kit produced by Spiral. And basically, if you're a software engineer and you build tools or applications and you use like libraries, and then you also use development kits, which are sort of like a set of pre-built functions and tools that allow you to really, really rapidly use best practices to expand whatever you're working on with existing tools. So, BDK and LDK allow software engineers to basically just pick up this set of tools that have been really well constructed and really well documented, and then like plug it in to their existing applications and be off to the races with Lightning and Bitcoin. So it's good stuff. But let's keep going. What else we got?
Chris, let's talk to us about Bitcoin energy and finding new sources of energy.
Yeah, Bitcoin Lake, or also, the group out of Guatemala, Bitcoin Guatemala, also called Bitcoin Lake, is exploring various waste to energy Bitcoin mining opportunities around Guatemala for a multi-pronged strategy to help Guatemala mine Bitcoin. Waste to energy was my background. A lot of the pictures that I saw on Twitter were kind of showing them exploring like what looked to be a landfill, and they were using methane gas extraction. So this is very similar to what is going on at, or similar but different than when they're doing flare gas mining. Great American Mining does it, where they're basically taking flare methane gas off of oil wells and running it through an engine that run Bitcoin miners. This is something that was very, very interesting. They're basically just trying to decompose their waste and use the methane that comes off of it in order to mine Bitcoin. As we've mentioned countless times on the show, methane is way more harmful than CO2, as much as 70 times as harmful as CO2 for the environment. So they're burning it in a combustion engine in order to power Bitcoin miners. I think this is a very cool initiative, and I love to see more of this, more innovation.
I'm gonna talk now. Todd Alt and BitNile, friend of the show, Todd Alt and BitNile and his company BitNile Holdings, purchased 1,323 additional S19 Pro Antminers from Bitmain. They now have almost 22,000 total Bitcoin miners up and operating. I believe they're just up in upstate New York. This is exciting. A smaller owned mining company. We had Todd Alt on the show back in April. Excellent to see mining companies continue to be able to expand and in an attempt to reach the lofty goals that they set for themselves for the different hash rates for the end of the year. Jesus, I cannot fumble any harder than I just did. I got all the facts out there. I don't know if we want to talk about this because I do think it's interesting that you're starting to see some miners actually plugging more miners in and increasing their hash rate after a prolonged period where miners were turning things off. We saw hash rate and difficulty drop off. So this reads to me as a very healthy move within the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, I would say so. We've seen a lot of the S19 is obviously the newest software or the newest hardware coming out of Bitmain. Obviously, there is also the WhatsMiner out of, I always forget what's the name of the company that makes the WhatsMiners. I'm drawing a complete blank. MicroBT. There we go. MicroBT's WhatsMiner. But yeah, I know a lot of the large or the people that are saying that right now the break-even price is 8 cents per kilowatt hour or 7 cents per kilowatt hour for Bitcoin miners. So obviously, if you're plugging in more machines, you probably have more favorable power pricing. So I assume that BitNile has a long-term contract at a cheaper energy price. P, is there anything else that you want to add there?
Man, I mean, the Bitcoin mining space is one of the very few truly sort of like zero sum spaces in Bitcoin. That is to say, when one Bitcoin miner is or entity or pool is doing poorly, it is to the other miners benefit because you're affecting the hash rate and they can take more of the block reward. I think this segues actually beautifully into our next story, which is that Poolin has lost a fuck ton of the hash rate that they had in their pool. They've lost specifically 40% of their pool hash rate. So that's a loss of about 10 exahash. This is 2 days after they suspended withdrawals from their platform because of insolvency issues. So the way this works, right, is if you are a Bitcoin miner and you were running one machine or 10, you basically can, and most do, opt to participate in what is called a Bitcoin mining pool. Now, a Bitcoin mining pool is a way to pool your compute resources, and then you share in the block reward. So instead of it being a situation where you are running these Bitcoin miners for months or years and then never mining a block, and then you magically do, and then you get 6 Bitcoin. That's the current block reward. Instead, you are participating in this very large pool of miners who are all, pointing their hash rate at the same pool. And then, those rewards are shared, split equally, depending on how much hash power you're putting in across all the miners that are participating in that pool. So most miners, the vast majority of them, have aggregated into one of the large mining pools that exist today. Now, we talked about this yesterday, but Poolin announced that they're having insolvency issues. And so they basically said, hey, the rewards that you've gotten for participating in our pool, when you get those rewards each block, they get put into their sort of their own temporary wallet or their wallet. You can leave it there as long as you want, and then you can take it off the exchange later. Now, they announced that they basically were suspending withdrawals, as we have seen with Celsius and so many others, because of insolvency issues. So what this means is if you had your hash rate pointing to the pool, then you were earning Bitcoin. And then they just said, hey, sorry, we're holding on to that for the time being. And they announced that hey, we're going to release it very soon. Don't worry. And they tried to create incentives to get people to keep their hash rate still pointed at their pool. They set it up so that there was a zero. They lowered their fees, the pool fees, to zero. So it was you were making slightly more, but 40% of everyone that had their hash pointed to the pool came to what I believe is the correct conclusion. And they were like, hey, you fooled me once. I'm getting the fuck out of here. And they basically have now pointed their hash rate at a different mining pool. And in Bitcoin mining, it's literally as easy as you just put in a different IP address and bam, you're participating in a different mining pool. It's one of the really cool things about the the way that Bitcoin mining works. And so that's what's happened. I think we're going to see more of that. I think that Poolin will probably never recover from this. And if they ever do release the Bitcoin that they've locked up, people will take it, will immediately move it into their own wallets, and then will bounce to another pool, as they probably should. And this is normal and acceptable and part of the competitive landscape that is Bitcoin mining.
I got nothing to add. That was great.
Yeah, I'm just going to kind of off topic, but not your keys, not your coin, self-custody, guys, but also not financial advice. Chris, go ahead.
Wait, actually, that is a great point. And it's actually pretty connected to what we were just saying, right? I want to just double down on that. If you have your Bitcoin on an exchange right now, you do not actually own Bitcoin. You own an IOU where you are trusting the exchange to make good on that promise in the future. And as we've seen with Poolin in a different way, because this is about Bitcoin mining, but we've seen with Celsius and many other platforms recently, that trust can be misplaced. So what you need to do, if you have your Bitcoin on an exchange, is learn the risks and how to safely take that Bitcoin off of an exchange and take self-custody of that Bitcoin. You should do that as soon as possible. Don't just listen to what I'm saying right now and be like, and go and do it, because then you can lose your Bitcoin. Go review some of the incredible guidelines that are out there. Take control of your own financial future. And when you are ready to, and when you are able to trust that you know exactly what you're doing and the implications of doing it, then and only then should you move it off to a situation where you actually are custodying your private keys and your Bitcoin.
Love it.
That's it.
Chris, talk to us about the Great Reset.
Well, there's a really cool thing. I know many people say, Bitcoin's not robust. What if the internet goes down? What if all these issues? Well, I'm going to show this great video real quick. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Very short video, but basically what is going on there, they have a Bitcoin node plugged in. It is using Starlink in order to connect as the internet connection, as well as using a solar panel, or there's a small solar connection in order that's powering the device. Obviously, this is not robust enough with solar only, that your node will be going down, obviously, during the evenings, but very, very interesting that it is using Starlink satellite. I know there's a great article in the Bitcoin Magazine censorship resistant issue talking about mesh networks, which is a way to circumvent internet service providers if they were to turn off the internet. I just think Bitcoiners and Bitcoin alike are very robust. It's very cool to see Bitcoiners build out tools that implement and can be used in the Bitcoin network. I know we've talked about this before with Seed Signer. Like, God forbid the government's all of a sudden ban people from, buying Cold Card, Ledger, Trezor, whatever the name of the brand is. Well, you can build a Seed Signer just by getting a Raspberry Zero, a 3D printed case, and like a camera. And like, there's no way that they would know. You're just like, hey, I'm just building computer parts, and you're making a hardware device. So I think this is a way of creating the Bitcoin network, making it more robust, and using a node, obviously, to sync up with the Bitcoin blockchain. I think it's very cool. Obviously, you need alternating power sources in order to keep it going through the evenings, but very, very cool to see it be built out.
Love it. Love it. Let's talk our main story now. And we want to talk the anniversary of Bitcoin becoming legal tender in El Salvador. As of today, 1 year ago exactly, the law was signed in to make Bitcoin legal tender in the country of El Salvador. What does this actually mean? It means that the use of Bitcoin as a currency is accepted, and its use is not subject to any taxes in the way any other country will tax you for your gains on Bitcoin as of today for right now. Since this has happened, since the announcement back in June of 2021, El Salvador has seen a great influx in tourism, as well as a lot of foreign investment. We see very loudly and proudly a lot of Bitcoiners moving themselves to El Salvador, spending some time in El Salvador, from the likes of Max and Stacy to Jimmy Song and Jeff Booth. We've seen countless people almost make this sort of pilgrimage down to El Salvador. It's exciting. I think there's a lot more work to be done. I saw a question from 100K JPEG asking what happened to the volcano bonds when volcano miners I mean, look, it was a very ambitious thing that was started. Obviously, the bonds are meant to be sold to then help finance the building out of the actual volcano mining operation. That hasn't happened yet, so remains to be seen how that will pan out. We will hopefully see an update on that in the near future. Realistically speaking, I think time will tell to see if El Salvador uh, survives this Bitcoin experiment that they put themselves on. I know a lot of people are watching, both proponents and antagonists against Bitcoin. Uh, we will we will see how this pans out. I think for the time being, El Salvador and Bukele are on the right track. My one caution and my one question that I presented to the two of you is, what happens if Bukele is no longer the president of El Salvador before Bitcoin really reaches its potential? Like, are your expectations that he would be succeeded in a situation like that, but there's no guarantee then that whoever succeeds him wants to continue this path?
I would say that the El Salvador situation is very nuanced, and I won't pretend to understand the ins and outs of like how political succession would work in the situation that he wasn't or was no longer leading the country. Given that he describes himself as the world's coolest dictator, like dictators do not generally like to give up power. So not sure how that would play out. But I think at the end of the day, the people of El Salvador as individuals and as communities embracing Bitcoin is always and only a positive thing. When it was first rolled out, there were a lot of reports of issues with sort of education and, apparently some people felt like it was rammed down their throats. But even like if you separate all of the challenges there, the more people are able to understand Bitcoin, whatever the means, the better off they will be as individuals, as communities, as countries. So if there was a new regime that did not support that, which seems like a very, very like far hypothetical, then the people who had learned about Bitcoin in the meantime would still be doing fantastically. Also, as a side note, the amount of tourism that has been driven towards El Salvador by this announcement is huge. So it'd be interesting to see how that would play out and how that would play out on the world stage. But as the title suggests, this is about Bitcoin Freedom Day. Fuck the WEF, the World Economic Forum, famous lizard people are deeply, deeply invested in, suppressing and preventing this kind of behavior. And by behavior, I mean a country adopting Bitcoin as legal standard because, as Christine Lagarde said, if there is an escape hatch, people will use it. So we have to block all the exits and prevent people from being able to voluntarily remove themselves from the, slowly flooding rat cage that we have created for them.
Yeah. I think it remains to be seen. I think P makes a great point. Dictators normally don't like to lose control when they are in power. They normally say that there's an end, but it's kind of like, how do they refer to it? It's like nothing's more permanent than a temporary government measure. It's like, oh, no, I'm only temporarily going to be in power. And then they stay in power much, much longer. I'm not going to say Bukele is going to do that or not do that. It's just speculation or what we've seen in the past. But let's just say he were to lose the election and give up his power to his successor. I don't know. It depends on if the people really like it. And then even it kind of comes down to two caveats. If people have their money in the Chivo wallet, I think the government could try and potentially confiscate it, or obviously they know how much you have when it's there, versus if you're using a free and open source software such as Moon Wallet, MUUN, Blue Wallet, countless other ones, Blockstream's Green Wallet. There's a ton of different wallet implementations that you can use out there. But with that being said, like if the new person were to come in, there's kind of two caveats. Do they make it illegal to own? Do they try and tax you differently? Do they like, hey, like he did this, we're not going to turn it off, or we're going to try and implement a law that reverses it? Like there's kind of just, I guess, many facets to it. But if people are using it and loving it, as we've said countless times before, there's no way for someone to prevent someone else from sending a Bitcoin transaction, barring, killing them or like holding them at gunpoint. If you want to send a transaction to the network and you have a legit Bitcoin address, nothing prevents you from sending that to another person. So yeah, I think it remains to be seen. I think there's a lot to play out. I think Q, you brought up a really great point that one of the questions that we had earlier about talking about volcano mining, obviously they needed the bonds to get the capital in order to implement that. Typically, and this is just what I've heard from Greg Foss, when you're doing a large bond offering, whether it's a government or corporation, normally you shop around the market in order to try and sell this or get an idea of how many people want to buy it. Like you go to your JP Morgan, you're like, hey, do you want to buy about $100,000 worth of, El Salvador bonds? And they either say yes or no, or we'll do 50K. And so you kind of shop around. I think we were kind of hitting at that peak of the price going down, people getting a little bit nervous and not wanting to invest the capital. So I think that when they were trying to offer the bond, what was that, in January or February, we were kind of already seeing the markets turn in November. So I think it was just kind of unlucky timing. And now with Bitcoin's price down, people don't know where it's going. But that's kind of my 2 cents or my 2 sats.
I do like all of these questions, and the topics we've brought up are so valid, from, whether, like, just the simple question of, like, is Bukele a dictator that we want to support? Like, there are examples of very deplorable dictators, but then, like, I will very quickly, just to present the other side of the coin for a second here. And mind you, before we kind of dive down this conversation a little bit more, I want to let everyone know we are in the process of finalizing on next Tuesday, so September 13th. We will be hosting a debate between Alex Gladstein and Jaime Garcia, just about El Salvador, Bukele, and if his actions are justifiable given what his ultimate goal is. I saw someone in the chat bring up, the reduction in crime, but there are also some questions around how he's gone about doing that. There are questions over whether or not, the wallet, the way it was rolled out, was acceptable. There are questions looming around whether or not, he has the authority to even go and use government funds to go out and purchase these Bitcoins. I do want to, there's one caveat, one wrench I want to just kind of throw out into the mix of it all. We talk a lot on this show about politicians' incentives and how, especially in the country that I live in, the United States of America, like, the alignment of politicians' incentives has been so far gone for so long. And I actually stand by truly believing that there's a degree in which the lack of term limits, coupled with the repeated election cycle, has incentivized politicians not to prioritize change for the betterment of society, but rather to not rock the boat, to steal from our conversation with Pete Rizzo. It's almost like they get rewarded for not doing things, for not passing legislation rather than passing the right legislation. On the flip side of it, you have a leader like Bukele, who's gone out very aggressively out against the gangs, has just rolled out this new currency in an attempt to get his country out of a crazy debt level that they find themselves in, or a debt situation that they find themselves in. It's not that dissimilar. There are similarities and there are differences, but it is more similar than not to what I have studied and read about of how Singapore came to be, and how the Prime Minister of Singapore came into power in the 60s and never really let go of his power over the next 30 years, but his prioritization of the growth of that country, like, led it to be where it stands today on the global stage. And we've heard Bukele talk about how that is the model he is attempting to follow, and how we in the West like to judge other countries for handling their business. My eyebrow is raised because I laugh at that idea. Like, I come from a country that isn't accepted by the American standards of democracy and how it should be run. So therefore it has been shunned by most of Western civilization. But most of Iran just doesn't give a shit. They don't want to be told what to do. The country of Iran, the Middle Eastern countries, have been around so long that for any westernized country to come in and say, this is how you should do it, no one's going to listen to you. And the history of the United States inserting their giant, yes, me with the giant nose, the US inserting their giant ass nose into everything that goes on in South America and Central America has led to this almost disdain or distrust of South American politics, when in fact, there's no reason why any South or Central American politician, country, or culture should look to America and be like, oh, yeah, they'll help us. Look at what we've done to all the other countries all across Central and South America. I don't know. I'm rambling a lot. I talked about the Middle East because, you know me, I can't shut up about Iran. I think there are sometimes we get lost in the values that are normalized in Western cultures, and we just assume that every other society and culture must adhere and accept these same values. And if they don't, they are the enemy. And that's a very, in my opinion, dangerous stance to take.
Well said, my friend. Well said.
Chris, that though.
Sorry, what was that?
I know you disagree profoundly with everything you just said. Explain to us why. And
I just don't like Q, so I disagree with everything he said. I'm completely joking.
The joke fell flat. I was trying to force Chris into an uncomfortable situation where he felt like he had to justify a belief he does not have. But yeah, man. No, I thought that was well said. So
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, for the audience, we are waiting for our next amazing guest who's going to join us very shortly. But as we go, we're just going to keep talking about the news, Bitcoin, which organs we've sold in order to finance our Bitcoin positions, and just the future. What gets us excited?
P, I know that there was a debate talking about Lightning and its use case and implementation. I know you being the pleb net co-creator or have worked on it a bunch.
One of
many.
A number of about 20.
What are some of the drawbacks of Lightning? Because I know a lot of people talk about the great things about Lightning. So let's start with the drawbacks. And then if you want to talk about some of the great nuances or things that can be done with the Lightning Network, I think that'd be a great conversation to have. It's kind of a Twitter that it's a thing that's been running around Twitter for those that have not seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will admit, I have not yet read that thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and get up to speed on that specific thread so that I can comment intelligently about it. But before I do that, I will say generally that, obviously you have Bitcoin, which is layer 1 technology. It is extremely secure. We call them Bitcoin miners, but, really they're basically being paid by the network to secure the Bitcoin network. That is to say, to make it economically infeasible for anyone, any nation state, any group of, whoever, to attack the Bitcoin network and try to, mine empty blocks or, temporarily disrupt Bitcoin. And at this point, it would cost an astronomical amount to do that. So the layer 1 Bitcoin is extremely secure. Blocks are mined every approximately 10 minutes. And then what you can do is you can build these technologies on top of that rock solid sound money foundation. And then you can choose to make certain trade-offs. So Lightning is a really interesting layer 2 technology that allows you to give up a little bit of in terms of centralization, because you are centralizing some things slightly. You are also giving up a slight, in some cases, a little bit of trust. And then what you're able to do is you're able to use this layer 1 Bitcoin bedrock to create this system that allows you to transact in Bitcoin via this giant spider web, the Lightning Network, very, very rapidly and with very low fees. So it really is an incredible technology, and it's trustless. Although, as I said, slightly more trustful than Bitcoin, because you are forming these channels and you're using those channels to route payments. But let me go check out this thread while you guys keep going, and then I'll circle back.
No. Actually, I want to just on the topic of like trust, privacy, and security. I think sometimes, like we talked about this a little bit yesterday with the news about, I believe it was Trezor and Wasabi. But my question to the two of you is, as we're discussing here in Lightning, like there are trade-offs. Like there is now a centralized point of control for the broader Lightning network. And then obviously there are individual nodes that run and operate and help disperse it. But at its core, what we've taken is a fully decentralized protocol and then started to centralize it at different points. The exchanges are another point of centralized control over the Bitcoin network, Lightning Network, things like Sparrow, Wasabi, any other of those types of platforms. Those are all the same, in my opinion. Chris, mute yourself. I could hear your typing. I'm curious if these trade-offs, is there, like, even with Fedimint, it's another thing where it's been created. It's a new form of technology off of Bitcoin. But one of the trade-offs is this is now a centralized group does hold and control this. Where or what are the trade-offs that each of you are comfortable with? Because for each person, I think they have a different appetite. And some people are willing to let someone else custody their Bitcoin on their behalf, while many others may not be as comfortable with that trade-off. There may be people who are plenty comfortable buying KYC Bitcoin, but then there are others who would much rather be buying in peer-to-peer transactions. So if you don't mind me asking, like, what are some trade-offs that you guys are comfortable with?
That's a super broad question. It's difficult to answer, to be honest. But you are correct that, like, everything involves trade-offs, right? Bitcoin is, when used privately and at the extreme, is that extremely decentralized, censorship resistant, if used correctly, privacy enabling platform, system, technology. And but it totally makes sense to me that we would make certain trade-offs, for example, with the Lightning Network, where you are, and again, the way the Lightning Network works is like, you don't have to use this larger network, this giant spider web of all these different channels, but it becomes so much more powerful when you do. But I run a Lightning node. If Q runs a Lightning node, and when I say Lightning node, what I mean is a node that runs Bitcoin Core, layer 1 Bitcoin, and then on the same node, sort of running parallel to and interacting with Bitcoin Core, you have a Lightning implementation. So there's Core Lightning, there's LND, and then there's Eclair. There are other ones, but those are the three most popular ones. And they all can intercommunicate and everything. And when we talk about, when I say there's these trust trade-offs, if I want to make a payment, if I want to be able to send sats, Satoshis, Bitcoin, between, for example, Q, right? Let's say that he and I are like, you know what? We hang out a lot. We don't. And we go out to beers a lot. We don't. And we want to be able to have like a tab that kind of goes back and forth. Basically, we could open a Lightning channel, and then there would be funds put up in that channel. And let's say I open an 100,000 sat channel to Q, then I could, send him, if a beer costs, 5,000 sats, I could push 5,000 sats to his end of the channel. And a Lightning channel is simply it's a 2 of 2 multi-sig, smart contract that exists between two entities, in this case, two nodes. So he and I have that channel, and we can route payments back and forth. And it's like a bar tab, right? I buy him a beer, he buys me a beer, I buy him a beer, and it kind of just goes back and forth, and the balance kind of shifts over time. And then eventually, in the future, if we want to, we can close that channel out. Either of us can do it at any time and basically settle the score, and then we both get back that on-chain Bitcoin. But the real power of the Lightning Network becomes evident when you have, if I have a channel with Q, and Q has a channel with Chris, and Chris has a channel with, Strike, a Strike node, then I can actually route payments. I can go like through Q, through Chris, to Strike, and then to anyone that Strike is connected to. And so that's where the Lightning Network becomes powerful. And we say that it's a slight trust trade-off because I am, to an extent, trusting Q's node with that Lightning channel, although there's myriad ways that that trust is sort of reinforced with incentives and makes it so that it is economically infeasible for him to try to screw me over with that channel. But that's kind of what we're talking about here. I think the Lightning Network trade-offs make sense. I think that Fedimint is a really interesting technology that you mentioned, Q. Fedimint stands for Federated Chaumian Mints, and it uses a number of really interesting technologies, blinded signatures, it does many things, but it allows existing trust groups, and the example that's given is like a community. So if there's like a village or a group of friends, they can create a Fedimint which basically they can sort of nominate these trusted, I forget what they're called. They're like, I was going to say conquistadors. That has negative connotation, and that's not what they're called. They're not like validators. They're basically like people that the community already trusts in meat space, or and guardians.
Guardians is the name of it.
And they then can kind of they can like restore lost access to lost funds if it's lost once you sort of put it into this sediment. So you're able to rely on these existing trust structures and models, if you choose to create this sort of like middle ground between, full self-sovereignty, custodied Bitcoin, multi-sig, by land, by sea, by air, all the shit that I talk about on one end. And then on the other end, you might have like exchanges where it's like all you have is an IOU. And then there's all these things in the middle, which are really important to explore. And Fediment does an amazing job of being a balance somewhere in between that spectrum that allows people who are not, who don't want to take on some of the responsibility or not able to of being fully self-sovereign with their Bitcoin and want to use these existing trust structures and basically be able to kind of in a way, kind of, this is a terrible way of describing it, but like have your cake and eat it too. So Matt Odell said really eloquently that, the thing is people will use whatever is easiest, right? The majority of people are going to use the system that meets their needs in the least effortful way. And so we have to, it is our responsibility. It's almost like a moral imperative. If we believe that Bitcoin is this life-changing and life-saving technology that we need to bring to as many people as possible, as rapidly as possible in this, increasingly inflationary world, then we have to explore these technologies, which do a really good job, as Fediment does, of finding that balance, because Fediment will be much easier to use for the average person than, than just owning, fully custodying their own keys, but it will allow them to be in a much, much, much safer position than, for example, using a non-custodial wallet, which is what a lot of people do on their phones, or, by an exchange. That was a long-winded explanation. Oh, dope. So glad. Yeah.
Chris, go full screen, baby.
Yeah. One of our intrepid listeners took this photo of me without my permission.
This is found on the WEF's homepage.
Yeah.
They
Look.
announced the chairman of Z-Bugs. They didn't call the chairman of the Bugs, chairman of Z-Bugs.
Fucking bullshit.
Jill, as I like to call him, Jill. So, chairman of Z-Bugs, congratulations on your new position. Will you be leaving us at Bitcoin Magazine?
Now, I'm actually at the World Economic Forum right now. This is a green screen behind me. It always has been. There's just insects crawling everywhere. And I'm eating all of them. A couple days ago.
I mean, there was that stream about a week ago where you had that bug flying around.
The green screen wasn't taking a good pass at it. My friends, it appears as though our beloved intrepid guest is potentially not going to be able to make it. What's going on?
Boo. So,
yeah, I'm trying to get a hold of him. Hopefully we can get him on in the next couple minutes, but you guys are doing a great job talking about the Lightning Network, talking about eating bugs.
I'm just going to say to the...
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Doing a good job talking about eating bugs.
Pull up...
We got
Chris,
him now, boys.
Pull up... I don't know how to pick Anime's most recent question, and we're just going to open this up as an Ask Me Anything session or Ask Us Anything session. Throw in your questions. We'll keep answering them. And in the meantime, we're just going to keep talking shit.
Wait, say that again, just real quick. Like, Ask Us Anything session.
Ask Us Anything.
There we go. I just had to do it. I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll do this until we get bored of it. So keep us entertained. We'll keep you entertained. Let's fucking go.
Okay, I think I should answer this one of like... more or less, I'll rephrase it of like, why the fuck am I not running a Bitcoin node? And then I'll let you guys answer part two. So why the fuck don't I? To be honest, I have no valid answer for this. I've complicated the situation for myself. And I honestly, like, I give everyone full right on this stream to continue to bully and shame me until this happens. And I promise you by the end of September, this will be resolved. There's no reason if you, and I will say this, I won't say everyone, but for the majority of people that I interact with, their introduction to Bitcoin was not as stateless money, freedom, like opt out of the fiat Ponzi. Like candidly for me, when I first learned about Bitcoin, first started buying Bitcoin, it was an investment. If there was an allocation in my portfolio, I candidly did admit or believe at least that I would eventually just trade this Bitcoin in for US dollars. It took me really diving into Bitcoin, learning more about it, understanding the history of money, seeing how far Bitcoin has the potential to go to better appreciate the technology underneath the price movement. But I think while people stay stuck on the price movement, they will not, nor will they have any interest in running a Bitcoin node itself. And I think that is the separator of once you get over the price only, this is going to be a vehicle to make you rich. And then you realize like the opportunities Bitcoin and the freedom it provides you. But the only way for you to really appreciate those freedoms is by running your own node. That is, I think, the catalyst to get people to run more of their own nodes. I don't know if you buy my argument or if you think I'm just so full of shit trying to justify the fact. Oh, McShane in the chats throwing shade because I don't pay rent.
Yeah, look, a cardboard box, it's real hard to get internet. Although, if you fucking you get one of those Starlinks, you could be good to go.
Which I honestly have been looking into because, let me tell you, Papa likes to travel.
You can see there somewhere, that is a Mac Mini that I'm in the process of turning into a node. You can run a Bitcoin node on I don't want to say almost anything, but on any old computer or almost any old computer. One of the things that's great about Bitcoin is that it is very focused on keeping the cost of running a node and low, so that sort of running a node is in the hands of the people, or can be in the hands of the people if they choose to. So, for $200 or so, if you want to buy all new components, or if you just have an old laptop sitting around, an old Mac Mini, an old computer, you can absolutely, install Bitcoin Core on it and be up and running in no time.
Yeah, I think people don't see, like, everyone runs a modem and a router now in this day and age because everyone needs Wi-Fi, everyone needs connection to the internet, or at least in the Western world, that seems to be the case. I would say. I think people don't see running a Bitcoin node as vital, but I think it is just as vital as having the internet. Like people would struggle in the Western world without internet nowadays. I mean, we're on it right now. Many people use it. I think to P's point, there is many different implementations that you can run. There's many different ways that you can do it. There's some that are more like plug and play, like Start9, but it costs a little bit more money. You could also buy a very fancy node like Ronin Dojo. That's a lot more expensive. You can kind of build your own. I'd say probably the price point's about $200 to $300, depending on the price, the parts as you're buying them. And then you can do it in a more self-sovereign way. You can run it on Umbrel. You can run it on MyNode. You can run it Raspberry Blitz. Some are a little bit more complex and know a little bit more about command line. Some are a little bit more out of the box, and it's clean UX and clean UI. It's kind of remains to be seen what you do and how much you want to do it. I think Start9 is a great trade-off in the sense that it's plug and play and easy to do, but you have to pay for it, and it comes at the cost of you're trusting a third party to help you with it. But I know many people that have used it like paying a little bit extra more money for it, that it runs great.
My friends, I have incredible news. Are you ready? Are your minds, bodies, and spirits ready? Our guest today, he has captured the internet, subdued it, and is able to join us live right now. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break. Stay tuned. We'll be back in a minute.
Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks. I'm excited to introduce our guest today. It is none other than Erik Cason, the self-proclaimed crypto anarchist, cypherpunk, iconoclast, and I've tried to pronounce. Thank you, dude. I practiced that word like 7 times during the commercial breaks. I was like, maker muck. Thank you, Erik. What did I miss? I know you're also a writer with the Crypto Sovereignty. We don't say the C word here, but you have written about Bitcoin and crypto since 2013. What am I missing? What did I not hit?
So you guys got my sound all right? All right, cool.
You sound amazing. You look amazing.
Okay, thank you. I feel like I crawled out of a dumpster, so that's nice. My power went out right before this, so I was like trying to figure out how to get that, and that's why I'm late. But crypto sovereignty. The reason why I use this word is actually the word crypto itself has it's concealed its own meaning, and I actually have an essay called "The Encrypted Meaning of Crypto," which is essentially about how blockchain bros, with their fundamental misunderstanding of like why you need a decentralized network that's censorship resistant. And it's not because like that's fun and it gives us good feelings. It's because you actually inherently need to have asymmetric cryptography at the bottom of what you're doing, because if you don't, the state can pretty much come and steal whatever they want from you at any point in time that they declare a state of emergency. And actually, Arthur Hayes had a great article that he released about this. I really liked it, and whatever your feelings about Arthur might be, he does such a great analysis of the 20th century and how the state of emergency is essentially used to overcome economic limitations that would happen with sound money, whereas now we live in a total fiat world. That essentially, what I really got from his analysis was that like the entirety of the economy and finance has been overcame in order to allow for the state of emergency to essentially seize all wealth and commit that towards what I like to call hyperstatism, which is this idea that like the full cultural, social, and economic development that we're in right now is completely and totally defined by the state. Trying to find a way of life outside of the state. At best, you can maybe be on the periphery like Amish people, but like even that has very strong limitations. So anyways, the reason I went originally with crypto sovereignty, and it was funny because I debated about it for a while if I should use that word or if I should go towards Bitcoin. And this was before kind of some of the drama with it. And I felt that crypto sovereignty is really what I wanted to kind of stick my flag in, because cryptography is what gives us sovereignty in the digital age. And then Bitcoin, with the explicit structures that are set up around that, then creates for a number of the other feelings I have around it, which at the bottom, I fundamentally believe it is a messianic tool that hasn't reached its fruition or recognition yet.
I want to take a step back for a second, and I hope you'll permit me to blow a little bit of smoke up your ass.
Sure.
If you don't know who Erik is, and Erik, I'd also love to hear sort of, we talked about this at BitBlock Boom recently, but I'd love to hear in a second your journey to Bitcoin and sort of what your history in the space is, because I think that's a really, it's kind of a key part of who you are and who you've become and what you've accomplished. But what I will say for our listeners is Erik is one of my favorite writers in this space. I would highly encourage everyone to go and go to cryptosovereignty.org and read through some of his pieces. They're incredibly well articulated, and they you really have to put energy into like picking them apart, and it takes like active reading to really sort of understand. But all the references are phenomenal. And you will be rewarded for going through them and really forcing yourself to process each sentence. I cannot recommend them highly enough. Your piece, the Messianic Bitcoin, is one of my personal favorites, but truly an incredible writer. So thank you for putting all the effort that you put into writing these pieces and to getting them out there. I don't think you get nearly enough credit, my friend.
Thank you. I really appreciate those salutations. And yeah, so my journey is pretty interesting. Before Bitcoin, I was really invested in far left politics, and sort of the apex of that came at the Occupy movement, which I was super enthused about. I was like, we're going to take on the state. We're going to take them out. We're going to usher in this beautiful revolution. It's going to be phenomenal. And like everybody recognized that money was the problem, that money to interest had overtaken pretty much all aspects of life. And as it developed, I slowly came to the realization where I was like, oh, Jesus, there's like no action plan. It's just kind of a bunch of people complaining. And like in the midst of that, somebody had mentioned Bitcoin to me, but I was like, well, this doesn't even make sense. The collapse of Occupy, I was kicked out of graduate school. I was kicked out of my house. I had to like move back in with my parents for a bit, and then with my girlfriend's dad, and he kicked us out too. And luckily, and I was in a crushing depression at this point in time. I could barely wake up. And I remember at like my lowest point, I ran into my high school English teacher, and I was working in a moving company making like $12 an hour. And I was so embarrassed of myself that like I ran out and sat in my truck and cried. And that, you know, that was, it really affected me. And I was finally at the place of like total rock bottom. I was like, there's no way out of this. We're fucked. I'm just going to live as a slave and be broke my whole life. And for some reason in the midst of that, I was like, oh yeah, this Bitcoin thing. What's this about? So I kind of started reading and digging, and I was like, this is really interesting. And then when I realized that you could get around capital controls with it, I was like, wait a minute, there's something really important here. So as I kind of kept studying, it was like this anchor that sort of helped claw me out of a depression. And so I then got a temp job, and then I got a job at a bank after that, and I was doing a bit better. But the whole time, like I'm like drinking more, and I'm like this is it. And it was funny because after about 6 months at the bank, they were going to promote me to be like manager of the division. And I went in to talk to the CEO, and we were going to talk about plans for the future of the bank. And I tried to pitch money, and he just thought I was insane. And they're like, no, like what the hell is it? They're like, we want to put like iPads in the branches. Like, that's not what we're interested in. And meanwhile, because this was about summer of 2013, I'd been so interested in Bitcoin.
Gavin Newsom just took Erik away from us.
We lost him just as I was getting my robe on.
Well,
oh no,
it's because you put your robe on.
It could be. It very well could be. And if that is the case, I apologize. And for nothing, because this wasn't my fault.
I'm sorry. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, you're back. I'm so sorry about that.
This is Gavin Newsom's fault. This is not your fault, man.
That, you know, I appreciate that, but if I might have had my shit together for my backup generator, this would be a little better. Where did I lose you guys at in my diet about my depressing life?
So the bank manager wanted to put a bunch of iPads in the bank, or the bank CEO wanted to put a bunch of iPads.
Yeah. And I was pretty much like, this isn't a fit for me. And serendipitously, because I had interviewed at Coinbase for a position they hadn't given me before, Olaf reached out right around the same time. And he was like flipping out because they were like scaling. And he was like, hey man, like good talk. And I was like, oh, hey, yeah, like how are you guys doing? They're like, we need bodies immediately. We're like desperate. He was like, do you want on? And I was like, yeah, like let's set up an interview. He was like, oh no, like fuck that. Like you have the job. Like I'm sending you a computer right away. Like get started. And I was like, okay. So dove right in and got started. And so that was like a pretty epic journey to being at Coinbase from 2013 to 2017. Met lots of phenomenally brilliant people, and also like watched this sort of dumpster fire evolve. And it was sad because I really cared about my clients and customers, because my goal was to connect as many people to Bitcoin as possible. I thought inside we did a phenomenal job. It was just dealing with management and other choices around that made the job real difficult, which is why Coinbase has such a terrible reputation around support right now. But for me, in this journey, meeting other people and getting to ask all of these questions, I got really hooked. It was probably in 2014 when I felt pretty well read on it, where like this question came up where I was like, how is it possible that this thing, this money, this object can keep an oath to itself that no institution, no man, no political course, no state seems to be able to maintain? And that oath to maintaining 21 million Bitcoin, and that if your private key is secured in yours, you know, it's secured. And so this led me on this long philosophical journey of trying to explore, well, like what does it mean when somebody has an object that can't be taken from them? Like, what does it mean when essentially someone can present their own self-sovereignty through the non-action, essentially the refusal to say, I would rather not. And to me, it took me on this long discourse where essentially through both sovereignty theory and various political theories, I started to really dig deep into what I believe Bitcoin to be is actually essentially a technological turning that leads individuals into self-sovereignty through the way that allows for us to enter into a truly free relationship with both technology and language as they intermesh to become a singular item.
So I'm curious because the fact that you are a part of the Occupy Wall Street movement, like the roots of that movement was very much, at least the way I interpret it, as very much prompted by the same things that prompted and inspired Satoshi to go down this rabbit hole and figure out a way to create and gift us Bitcoin. A, are you Satoshi Nakamoto? And B, do you feel like
Great question.
Bitcoin does in fact fit what the rhetoric around Occupy Wall Street was looking for?
That nobody's ever asked me if I'm Satoshi, and I'm absolutely not. Like I don't
believe that for a second.
I'm a bozo, so I really appreciate that you could think so highly of me. Fun side note: as I met Neil Stephenson, the author of Cryptonomicon, at a conference 4 or 5 years ago, and very sarcastically was like, "Hey, are you Satoshi Nakamoto?" He got really offended. He was like, "No." He was like, "Why would you ask me that?" He was like, I don't have the ability to defend $20 billion. He was like, it's not, you shouldn't ask people that question. That's not nice. Wow. And I was like, oh,
you pissed off. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then I like came away, I was like, maybe he is Satoshi Nakamoto. And it was funny because later in the conversation, I asked him another question. I was like, what are you like really afraid of in the future? And this was like 2019. He was like, oh, like, for thousands of years, we lived in a world where like truth had absolutely no bearing on the world. Like people could just live inside of the lies and the sort of decrees that were given to them. He was like, so I feel very fearful that we're going back to that. And to me, it was such a premonition of everything that would come in COVID and kind of in this second decade of the 21st century, or in the third decade. So I really appreciate that question of, am I Satoshi Nakamoto? What was the second part, if you could rephrase that?
Do you feel like what Bitcoin has become is, in fact, it feeds into the rhetoric for what the people that were involved with Occupy Wall Street were looking for?
Yes, and this is sort of the hilarious crypto part again, is that like it serves the rhetoric perfectly, and it actually sort of creates a turning that goes, hey, look, like it turns out like if you want to fix the money, it's not a matter of implementing deep socialist or communist agendas, but it's actually about creating free market economics that work in such a fundamental way that the state no longer is in control of the monetary system. And that was one of the things that really developed for me sort of in my pathway of moving away from far leftism, was really understanding that free market mechanisms and economics, like those were essentially eviscerated at the beginning of the 20th century. And we got these different models of state-based capitalism, but state-based capitalism always has its roots in statism, and is, in my opinion, is inherently fascist because of the way that there is no way to actually have capital markets that operate and allocate correctly when you have such deep state involvement. And a fun word for the day is dirigitism. Dirigitism is the action of state involvement in the economy. So I believe that we live in a deeply dirigitist world at this point in time, where even being able to try to see what a free market economy looks like is pretty much impossible because of how deep the state is involved in pretty much all facets of life. So ultimately, I do think it served the rhetoric of Occupy Wall Street, but it does it in this really interesting way where, as you pull the thread more and more, it actually has you sort of critiquing, in my opinion, socialist ideals and moving much farther towards libertarian ideals. And also, just to be clear, I'm not on the side of like capitalism or socialism. I think Bitcoin is something so unique and radically different. It takes the most extreme aspects of both and fuses them into a new thing in a Hegelian dialectic, essentially.
Can you expand on that? Like, what is something very extreme in socialism and what is something very extreme in capitalism that can both be found within Bitcoin?
Sure. One of the extreme things, sort of more on the fascist or the dictatorial side, is the choices Satoshi made. The 10-minute block time, the 21 million units, using the SEP256 curve, like all of these things that he chose, those were singular decisions that he made unilaterally. And there is no compromise around that whatsoever. And those are very fascist notions. But on the same way, he so radically respects individuals in such a way that he homogenizes everyone that is part of the Bitcoin network and says, look, everyone will be totally equal to everybody else. If the value of one Bitcoin goes up, all Bitcoins are totally equal. If the value of one Bitcoin goes down, same thing. The value of all of those Bitcoins are equal. And the extremes to say, look, like if you secure your Bitcoin with your private key correctly, no one can ever take that from you no matter what. Even if everybody, and that is such an important feature, because now we're no longer dealing with these two dichotomies fighting each other, but we're almost picking out and taking the best parts of both, recombining them in such a way to allow for ourselves to move forward with what I believe is actually the rhizome of a totally new form of the political. And actually, you guys are going to be publishing in next edition's print copy an article I have called what did we end up calling it? But it's essentially about how Bitcoin is the most political thing that exists, and through it renewing this idea of the political, it overcomes party politics on a whole and creates sort of this new baseline for everybody. And that's not because Bitcoin actually is this radical political ideal, but it's because it's so apolitical in a world where everything has been politicized. It presents itself as becoming the most political thing.
Oh, I love that idea. That simply by abstaining, by standing apart, Bitcoin becomes the most political thing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to quickly, if I can interrupt, P, you can read Erik's article that he is referencing in the Orange Party issue of Bitcoin Magazine, the print edition. You can get your subscription at the Bitcoin Magazine store using promo code BMLive to get 10% off, because we didn't show it earlier, so I figured I should do it now.
Good show.
Erik, while you were your internet was glitching out, I felt compelled and inspired to put on my wizard robe, which I'm wearing right now, and I'm going to put the hood up.
Nice.
Because I'm, but in your article, Messianic Bitcoin, I think a lot of your writing does this, but your writing kind of conveys this level of excitement and optimism that I find, I got to take this thing down. I look too ridiculous. That I find super compelling. And there's a specific quote that I wanted to read that I identify really strongly with, because I also was going through a period where I felt like the world around me was kind of bereft of meaning, and it was really, really difficult for me to feel motivated and excited about progress and the things that I wanted to contribute to, because I didn't see a way for that to be to persist long term. I didn't see any systems that would support these goals that I had and the things that I cared about until I found Bitcoin. And if not for Bitcoin these days, I would also be profoundly depressed. But in this article, you say, no longer will we tolerate living in a world of liars, sycophants, and sociopaths who seek to control everything through fear and terror, authority, and decree. No longer will we idly sit by and allow them to eat our wealth and reduce us to impoverished destitution for their selfish and greedy desires. No longer will we allow for the corrupt and deranged version of false democracy to allow for the theft of the world in exchange for broken political promises we all know to be lies. We now have something better, a way to resist and fight back, a messianic weapon of unequivocal value, which they can never take away, they can never destroy, and will outlast them all. For Bitcoin is not just about money, it is about a new way of life. And that really, as I said, resonates with me. So here's my question to you. What do you feel like the largest threat to that optimistic view is in today's age? Do you feel like there's anything that we all need to be focusing on and thinking about and explicitly fighting against, because it threatens that beautiful opportunity in front of us?
Yeah. In my opinion, I actually think the greatest threat is the financialization of Bitcoin and trying to integrate it to play well with the state. I think it's a really dangerous idea, and I think essentially what we're watching going on with Ethereum is very similar to the dangers that I could see come to Bitcoin. And I'm specifically talking about how much ETH is on centralized exchanges and the way that they're going to launch ETH 2.0. I really struggle to see how they're actually going to implement this in a meaningful, decentralized way that doesn't have various threads of censorship through it. In addition to, I don't see how it doesn't just become regulated chain. And that really, because most of my philosophical work deals with a figure in history known as Homo sacer, and that in Latin it means the sacred man. But the word sacer, it doesn't really hold its meaning in translation, because it's not just sacred, but it could mean like accursed as well. And essentially throughout human history, these are people that are legally decreed to that anybody can kill, but they can't be sacrificed. Because the idea is that they're actually outside of the purview of the law of the gods on a whole. And so people just have a right to be able to kill and rob them if they want to, and that's called legal.
Wait,
and we
what?
saw it's, yeah,
Wait,
this has happened all throughout human history.
Wait, what's the term?
Homo sacer. And there's a whole series wrote by a philosopher, Giorgio Agamben, who was really kind of like my first philosophical love. And the first book that really hooked me was called The Sacrament of the Oath. Or is it Sacrament of the Oath? But essentially he tries to parse out like, what is it that actually empowers the oath to like have meaning at all? And he does this deep etymological dive that is out that like the oath and the sacrifice are these things that like mutually fuse into each other. And unless you can like put something at stake in your language directly, which for most people lives directly, that like the oath was meaningless. And so essentially like if you broke your oath, people could kill you. And like that's just legitimately how things operated for a long time. And so essentially the reason we trace this lineage is because the legal decrees that allow for somebody to be found guilty are found inside of the same operations. And for me, the greatest concern within this entire field is being able to protect people that normally couldn't be protected. And so I have to ask questions like, what if we somehow had Bitcoin in the 1930s and we were able to give that to the Jewish people? Like, how would have that changed the outcome of World War II? And then just another really fucked up fact is that actually IBS, the International Bank of Settlements, it actually finds its origins from a bank that was originally made for reparations payments from World War I, and Germany was supposed to feed payments into that. But when Hitler and the Nazis seized power, they actually used that bank to launder the gold that they extracted from the teeth of Jews that they killed in the Holocaust into this bank. And so at the end of World War II, when the Allies were at Bretton Woods and they started negotiating around what to do with this bank, the Norwegian contingency refused to actually even sit down at the table until there was the promise from FDR that this bank would be totally liquidated. So they get that promise, sit down, Bretton Woods comes out, Truman dies, or FDR dies, Truman comes to power. He says, you know what, actually, this is a really great bank. We should use it for something. We should use it for like international settlements. And lo and behold, the Bank of International Settlements is a literal Nazi bank that got its seed funding from the Holocaust. Like, you can't make this shit up. It's so fucking bananas.
Jesus
and to me,
Christ.
like, that's part of the whole story of humanity that's going on right now, in my opinion, is that when you really look at what's occurring in the world, not only are these ironies so dramatic, but to me, in the concourse of human history, like, these are almost the things that have to happen, because we have to look at this and go, oh my God, what's going on is so horrific and so dark and so nihilistic that I think for many of us who look out in the world before Bitcoin and have that depressed view, we have to have this radical break to say, no, like, fuck this place, fuck this society, fuck all of this absolute bullshit nonsense you want me to participate in. You want me to shut up and sit down and do whatever I'm told, including sitting aside while, you know, one of my favorite ones is not favorite, but in terms of one of the things that highlights the most is I just have no interest in military spending. I have traveled all around the world and met people from all walks of life, different cultures, different religions, and everyone that I have met has been a beautiful, accommodating, loving person. And so when I'm told that there are those people over there that are bad that we need to kill, fuck you. I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in arming you or helping you go kill people. If you think someone is so much of a threat that you want to go drop bombs on them, well, go get a gun and go fight them yourselves, you fucking coward. Because I am so angry at this point in time that my money is used to kill children around the world. And I actively know that that happens and that we conduct ourselves inside of these tertiary genocides that don't get discussed, like what's going on in Yemen or other places. And with Bitcoin, I finally have a way to actually object in a deep and meaningful way. Not only can I just say no, but I can say, no, you any of my wealth. No, I'm not going to participate in this system of abuse and exploitation anymore. And even if that means you're going to destroy me, you can't have my money. And I think when we all become courageous enough, or not even all of us, even a small sliver of us become courageous enough to stand up against that, I think we find the renewed hope of what it means to be humans in the world, and specifically one that has all of this advanced technology that's so important to ensuring that we remain free into the 21st and 22nd century, which I even with where Bitcoin's at right now, I have very serious doubts if we'll be able to escape the cage that's been built around us.
I want to go down a couple different rabbit holes with you, Erik. You said the magic words for me to go down this, but like my family is from Iran originally. I have a majority of my family lives in Iran. I've seen the way my parents were spoken to before 9/11 and after 9/11. I genuinely have a class of friends that were my friends before 9/11 happened, and then I literally never saw them or their parents ever again. My question to you is, like, I love this idea, and I always talk about how if we lived in a country that was purely based on the Bitcoin standard, we pay fine. Everything stays the same about the US with the exception of our currency is now Bitcoin. Things like, where do our tax dollars actually go to? How is the money the government is spending getting allocated and then distributed further from there will actually become more public, and as a result, the politicians will have to be held accountable both for the things they say and the things they do, which right now just doesn't exist. Um, I'm torn because what I presented to you is as simple as literally just change USD to Bitcoin and you have accountability, but like life is not that easy and simple. So what am I missing in this situation that I just prescribed to further enhance the accountability on our political leaders and the powers that be in this country first?
Well, in all honesty, it starts with the question of what is money, and it's always phenomenal to me to try to start this conversation with people and see how far off basis they are, because pretty much nobody understands what money is or how it functions or why it does that. And and I think most of us know, as you start to pull that thread and you start to really understand what is money, you realize how completely crazy it is that they can just willy-nilly make it up and give it to themselves to go spend on whatever. And they go, oh yeah, like next election cycle will be accountable. So I think by and far, education is the most important thing. And specifically, not just education about giving people facts, but pedagogical education, of giving people the actual tools to try to understand these things themselves and to think for themselves. Immanuel Kant, he has a great essay from 1792 called What is the Enlightenment? And it's this phenomenal essay that's pretty much just about how all that the Enlightenment is he says that it gets summed up in the motto of saper audu, which means dare to think. And all that the Enlightenment was about was thinking for yourself and having the courage to say what you believe to be true. And the ancient Greeks had a word for this too called parasoa. And parasoa was the idea to speak courageously and risk yourself by speaking in that courage. And I think many of us early Bitcoiners are already on a path towards doing this because what's going on in the world is insane. and it's wrong. It's immorally wrong. It's ethically wrong. It's socially wrong. And it's even mathematically wrong. They literally have broken accounting at the bottom of all fiat money. That's how it works. That's the only way it works. And that's literally what fiat means. It means by decree. And so by decree, they have made things, paper, that has no inherent value, have value. Does that mean it's actually valuable? No. But because we're so deep into this world of statism and authoritarianism, when we are told authority, not truth, creates legitimacy, we believe that. And the truth is that truth, not authority, is the purveyor of legitimacy more than anything else. So I think step one is just this educational movement. But then if we were actually to enter into a world where Bitcoin was the monetary standard in the United States, like, I think things would radically change almost overnight. And mostly because, as you're saying, we have this really, really public money. And this is one of the reasons why I critique privacy chains, is because I want this to be a money that becomes what's utilized by organizations around the world. And we need the transparency to say, okay, you know, I paid a Bitcoin in taxes. I can watch the UTX go wherever they're going. Hey, there's like a bunch of money that went over here. Like, what's this thing? There's like an awful lot of money trolling around. Oh, it turns out there's a secret military project that, you know, we can now trace the lineage and origin. And so next time they ask us to pay tax, I go, well, fuck you. You broke your promise on how you were going to actually utilize my money. So I'm not going to pay. And I think that this is going to be part of what this sort of politics of the future is going to get produced. Is the internet is like such an insane and radical tool that we're all absolutely underappreciating how radical of a tool it is. And that, like, it's going to be here forever. It's going to be here for the next, you know, several millennia if humanity survives. And so in being thoughtful in how we're going to use that in order to create a new form of politics that overcomes, you know, what our 300 to 500-year-old system that we have going on right now, is going to be really incredible. And I think with these new fluid and changing and frankly unknown forms of politics that we're going to discover, it's going to radically alter the way that not only is politics done, but the responsibility that people have and how money is spent. And ultimately, it's going to make war a much more difficult process. And also, on a final note on that thought, I just want to say I'm really sorry that you had friends that were bigoted and racist enough that they would cut you out of their life after a bunch of shitbags decided to do a terrorist attack. And then specifically, like, you know, not even tangentially related to you.
No, I mean, to be honest, like, my parents gave me a very sheltered and protective lifestyle, and I didn't realize this. I will just say this. If you've never seen the show Rami on Hulu, there's an episode, I believe it's episode 4 or 5 in season 1. It's called Strawberry Something. And it's his version of the day of 9/11 and what happened. And I remember watching that, and I literally was like, whoa, that felt real to me. And I called my dad and I was like, whatever happened to this one family that we were like tight with? Like, this was my best friend in the 2nd and 3rd grade. And then just like, we never spoke to them. We never hung out. And he's like, oh, we just, you know, drifted apart, went different ways. I'm like, did they say something to you after 9/11? And I was like, he genuinely was like, who told you? And so I actually didn't even feel it in that moment. And my parents just shielded me from that. So I don't want to act as though like I really lived through it in that way. I mean, mind you, my nickname from the 6th grade until quite literally 2020 was terrorist in a lot of my friends' phones. So, whole other story.
That is fucked up.
Whole other story.
Super fucked up, man.
But it's, for me, it's all rooted in this accountability. And you bring up a great point where this made up money has given governments. Now I want to expand this because it's not just the United States of America. It's every foreign government that can do this, to where if they feel inclined, they can just print however much money they want or need to accomplish things like wars, to accomplish aggressive attacks against other countries, to just buy fucking real estate in a foreign country. Like all of these things are within the scope of ability of governments now. I just wonder, in your opinion, and I hate the speculative questions myself, but I'm curious what you think of.
But here we are asking them.
That's all I make a career hedging the fact that no one likes to be asked these questions, but I'm going to just ask them anyways. How do we unwind? Like, what is realistic? What is going to, in your opinion, be that breaking point for countries to have to exit the fiat off ramp? Is something like what we see in El Salvador going to be a case study on how it's going to be recreated? Or is it going to be what we're bearing witness to in Japan and Europe as we speak, for them to either have to be forced into the dollar or potentially take a different exit ramp?
Just to expand on, what you're for the statement, and take what you want or make it more difficult for regulations. I want to move several steps farther. That, like, with you being known as terrorists, it's pretty easy to go, well, he's clearly an enemy of the state. He's a brownie. He clearly supports those people. He might even be one of those evil Muslims. Like, fucking kill him and take his shit. And that seems like a ludicrous idea. I want to be clear, like, that was done all throughout fucking human history. Literally, the state goes, hey, these brown people we don't fucking like, let's take all their shit and kill them. And that's how it played out. Again and again, the Armenian genocide, the Roshan genocide, it goes on and on and on. In addition to, then you look at stuff like the Cultural Revolution in China, where it's like small differences of opinion on the same side, they just lose their fucking minds and not only kill each other, but they eat each other because they're so vengeful about it. There's thousands of cases of cannibalism that happened during that. And so during the Cultural Revolution, there was cases of cannibalism because they literally took the statement, eat the capitalists, directly. Yeah,
that is wild.
Fucked. And that's one of the things I get from history, is just how ludicrous things got many times. Is that when we talk about things happening and going, no, that's just too far-fetched, I guarantee there's a dozen references that we have throughout human history.
People are that could never happen now. We're a modern people. We are raised above.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we're actively watching the Uyghur genocide, which, as I've pointed out before, it's this is the apex of genocide, because it's not even just about taking all their shit and killing them. It's about taking all their shit, hollowing them out as a culture and a people mentally, and then putting them back out in the world, being remember, we're monitoring everything that you do, and we can torture and kill you at any point in time. So you better shut the fuck up and do the exact thing that we want, or else. And those are people that we've made the decision that we're gonna have a deep economic interdependence with, because we like consumer shit. How betraying to the ideals of what America is supposed to represent and to back, and the fact that we allowed for Nixon to so thoroughly fuck everything in this country, and then we just kept walking forward. And so the way that I think that we detransition from fiat is, I actually think, a deeply political movement. And I actually think that's the only way it's going to catch fire, is when we start to realize that it's not the Democrats or the Republicans that are going to solve this, or even some brand new third party, but it's going to be about us radically organizing on our own independently and making a choice to exist outside and beyond the state through not just peer-to-peer exchanges, but collectives, networks. And a lot of this matches up with the idea of anarcho-syndicalism. Because at the bottom, I think Bitcoin really is the purest form of anarchism that we've had. And some of the best methods that we've seen anarchists organize is through syndicalist methods, which was essentially the way that anarchists organized themselves in revolutionary Spain during the Civil War.
What does that mean, the term syndicalist methods?
Syndicalist, it essentially means that people collectivize themselves on really any scale that they want. So we all need water, we form a water collective. We all need wood, we form a wood collective. And
what would the other end of that spectrum be? If you have that on one end, and then is there another end of that spectrum, or the opposite of that?
The opposite of syndicalism?
Yeah.
I think it would just be centralized fascism. You know,
Yeah.
where essentially you have a centrally controlled economy that is dictated everywhere. Whereas the idea of syndicalism is it is all loosely formed, decentralized networks that then use mutual aids in various situations. I highly recommend reading Rudolf Rocker's essays on anarchism because he goes into deep detail about this. He was given the assignment by Emma Goldman when he returned from Europe, and she was like, "You need to write about anarcho-syndicalism." He was like, "Right on, I'll get that shit done." And so, like, I actually think we're really entering in. This is, in my opinion, this is sort of like the end of the first chapter of what Bitcoin is, because like now it's becoming clear what it is. Now people who essentially are hearing the call are hearing it and answering it. People are piling in, and my story of coming back from depression is just one of, at this point, I've heard dozens, if not hundreds, and I've had all kinds of insane DMs from people just saying, hey, like I had similar experiences. I felt crushed. I felt sad. I didn't know what to do. And then I found Bitcoin and it gave me all of this new hope. And it wasn't because I could like make gonzo money and get out, but it was because I finally felt like I had something that was really mine that nobody could take from me. And again, I want to emphasize how fucking crazy it is that we live in a day and age of advanced global technological, you know, magic. And the idea of simply owning something that can't be stolen from you is like the most radical idea that exists still. And so to me, like at the very bottom, this is why I ultimately believe Bitcoin is messianic, because it doesn't have anything to do with money, but it has to do with
You lost him again. Eric, come back to us.
We can actually blame Elon Musk for this one because it's my Starlink that's coming in.
No, I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised that this conversation is getting any views right now, given how many of the comments I'm seeing get posted right here on Restream that aren't actually coming up on YouTube. So
Wait, seriously? They're censoring us again?
Oh, 100%.
Really?
Andrew Novak wrote a comment. Andrew Novak wrote, Saddam was going to take euros for oil and then 9/11, which is a story we've talked about a lot on this show. I will never stop bringing that up. And then shortly after that, Global Nonsense wrote, adrenochrome is the money of the elite. Neither of these comments are found in our chat.
Wait, did he say adrenochrome?
Yeah.
Adrenochrome?
Yeah.
Got it. All right. That's the
So
Fear and Loathing Las Vegas reference.
Saddam and adrenochrome are clearly trigger words for you.
The second one is funny, but yeah, YouTube is brutal these days. We have like you know, all the comments that are going through this through various platforms piped in so that we the host and the guest can see them live, and it's very interesting to see which comments YouTube censors immediately and silently. Like you wouldn't even know unless we also separately had this other chat, which is connected to the YouTube API. It's dark shit.
Oh,
It is. And I mean, like, that's, for me, that's the other reason Bitcoin is so important is that I actually think at the back end of this, like Bitcoin as money, I actually think vanishes. And I actually think we get Bitcoin as like the backbone of the internet. And we'll essentially use lightning channels to exchange data and make everything completely non-censorable. There'll be like we're in the belly of the beast right now. Like we are very deep. It's very clear that the financial system is having seizures and is in the throes of figuring out just how exactly it's going to die. Our politicians fucking gaslight that absolute shit out of us. I mean, the fact that, like, the thing that amazes me is like Joe Biden gave that speech, and before he did it, there was like a group of people who surrounded him who were like, yeah, like the aesthetics for this are really good, and it communicates all of the stuff that we really
fucking
want to.
Shit. What happened? Who made that call?
dude, seriously, someone better have gotten fired.
I don't think so.
No, no, they got promoted, or like,
exactly.
You know, now they're like key speechwriter. And again, looking at history, like we need to remember that like this is how things escalate. And furthermore, like anyone who's involved with government at this point in time, like they're obviously a shithead that isn't considering or thinking about the general state of the world and how politics is right now, because as we've watched all of this collapse, in my opinion, anybody who wants to go get involved with the government and think that they can change anything is really not thinking this through. And if they are, I think the alternative is actually much more scary, is that they're actually evil. And like, I don't want to throw this term around lightly, but when I say evil, like they're literally incapable of having the thought that what they are doing is wrong. Like there's always some excuse, there's always some reason, there's like whatever you say to them about why they're participating in it, there will always be a good reason from their stance. And so my opinion, that's why it's actually evil, is because there is no way to have a meaningful discussion where they come to the moral imperative that's presented to them. There will always be an excuse around it. And to me, like, I think this is the world we're going to go into for quite a while. And I actually think at the apex, it is going to essentially be just as we saw all throughout the wars of the 20th century. Not some other state coming in and blowing us up, but our own government turning to us and going, yo, there's some shortages. So that cabbage you got, give it to me or that.
So how do we inspire people to, first of all, I agree. No one is the villain in their own story. No one looks in the mirror and is like, I'm an evil person and I'm taking this because I want it. Everybody has a narrative around why it's okay. But how do we inspire people to, not those people, but everyone else, to acknowledge the situation that they find themselves trapped in? How do we grab people by the collar and shake them awake?
Speak truth to power. Like I'm just some crazy motherfucker. Like I got lucky enough that not only did I get on this ride early, but that I have been speaking to these things because I really care about them. And it's been incredible to me watching people applaud me and, invite me on shows like this and tell me to say more, to write books. And it's because when people hear that truth that they need so bad, it not only is refreshing, but it's inspiring. I always think it's interesting when I meet like very typical normie people, because like I'm so kind of off the periphery on my own thing. And when I'll say what my own truths and visions are, these people are usually really taken aback, and I've noticed in some people it really sparks something in them. And the most fascinating is when it's like totally unexpected people that I never thought it would like rile something up in them. A great example is like my veterinarian. She's just an older, very liberal woman who, very heartfelt, warm and caring. And like, I gave her some orange pill stuff and I was like, be well. And then the next time I encountered her, she's like, wow, like Bitcoin, like this is super interesting. She was like, I'd never imagined that something like this would exist. And just watching that sort of light up her world and the way it changes her is what I'm convinced is the most important thing, and the very same way that like the most important thing that people could do after the death of Jesus wasn't to, it wasn't to try to figure out how exactly they were going to make Christianity take over the world. It was to speak to all of the people who that Christianity spoke the deepest to. And and that's who I'm speaking to, is like, I'm not interested in converting normies and getting this huge consensus and majority to come on board. I think that'll happen in due time. I'm super interested in the 2% of people that are going to get fired up, that are actually going to buy Bitcoin, that are actually going to self-host themselves, are going to do their best to understand the technological details and to really talk to people about it. Because those are my people. And my job specifically is to talk to them and say, you are onto something very, very important. And you need to keep driving and pushing. Don't regard this as some technological development. Don't regard it as a normal company or a way to make money. Realize that you exist in such a unique and important time, and that you get to be part of giving this gift to humanity and ensuring that it blooms as it is supposed to. Because on that same note, the other danger is that like Bitcoin can fail. And it can fail if we're not all doing our best to ensure that it's going to be successful, it's going to be understood, and that its mission is operating as expected to. And that was one of the dangers that we saw come up, during the block size wars. And I feel very confident we're going to see it again moving into the future, particularly when we see the state regulatory attacks come on board.
Yeah.
And it's going to be all of our responsibility to make sure that not only do we help and protect one another, as we saw, God damn, it warmed my heart to see how people really came out for holding on. Here's an individual who put themselves out front and center and said, they're the fraudulent piece of shit. saying that he is the founder of Bitcoin, and it is not true. And that fraudulent piece of shit came after him. And he, not only did he put himself front and center and take those bullets, but Bitcoiners rallied around him and said, hey, we want you to know an attack on one is an attack against all. And we got your back. And we showed that to him. You know, and as somebody just said in the chat, well, we are all holding on. And I think that that's really important that people know, because, and as I've seen here too, if you throw yourself into this, you will find other people who want to work together, that want to talk about the same things, that want to go deep and help each other. And I promise you that it will be much more spectacular than you could ever imagine. Because like I never even expected to get a tenth of the way that I am. And so now that I'm talking to the people that I'm talking to, I'm working and doing the things that I'm doing, I feel such a light inside of me that I never even knew existed before. Like I honestly just thought I was going to work a meager middle-class job for most of my life, watch some sports ball, and that would kind of be it. And now I feel like I get to participate in the most important movement in humanity. And I very sincerely believe that. And even when it comes to challenge, I actually think I can defend it adequately. But that's a very long philosophical diatribe.
I want to, Eric, if I may, there's something you kind of alluded to at the very beginning of our conversation. I think you alluded to it a little bit throughout as well. But that is, and I'm not trying to frame it as this will happen, but there is a possibility of the outright failure of Bitcoin. And I've had conversations with the likes of Svetsky, D++, John Vallis, and hearing the ideas of what actually would be the cause of Bitcoin's failure. Would it be a state attack that prevents it from really reaching its full potential? And what does that actually mean for the future of humanity and society? I'm not trying to play the doom and gloom speculative stuff, but
but let's fucking doom and gloom.
Let's doom and gloom for a second here. I'm curious, where are you most afraid of an attack on Bitcoin that could be a successful attack on Bitcoin?
Tell us your darkest fears, Eric.
Meat space. We all got these fleshy bodies that can, if you put a blowtorch to it, it's not going to work out very well. And we're probably going to be pretty pliable after that. And I actually have an essay called The Theory of the Partisan, which is based off of Carl Schmitt's book by the same title, Theory of the Partisan. But mine's called Theory of the Digital Partisan. And I actually think like as things escalate, the state is going to attack these shitty meat suits that we have. And thankfully, through the digital newsphere, we're actually going to get all of these anons that are going to pop up and produce themselves and give us the answers that we need. Similar to how Shaolin Freilich kind of popped up out of nowhere during the block size wars. He was like, hey, check it out. Like I got the solution here. And I think the same thing will happen in the future, is maybe we get regulatory attacks, maybe the state puts clamps on developers. There's any number of ways, but I think as these social attacks play out, like we will find that anons will rise up from the internet to essentially be the foot soldiers for the future that we need. And it's no wonder that it's that way, because, part of the thesis of what's operating is that because we live in this global digital panopticon at this point, it can actually locate anybody and put the clamps on them if they need to. And so like we literally need digital pseudo-anonymous people to rise up to save us, because they're the only people that are capable of doing that. And I think that's also going to be how the internet comes to present the fullness of its power, is because anons will rise up and provide novel new forms of technologies, new bits, different ways for Bitcoin to develop, where what they're doing speaks for itself and itself alone. It's not about their title. It's not about whatever person they might be. It simply has to do with what information they provide. And that's very, very important. And I think that goes all the way back to what Satoshi did. Satoshi Nakamoto only matters because of the art that he produced into the world and the way that we got to experience that art. And he could only present that art insofar that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. not some man of flesh and blood that we can find and rip his fingers off, but because he is an anonymous no one who doesn't exist in our world in any meaningful way. And just to be clear, even if we did find the person or group or whoever, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever controls his handle, that's not Satoshi Nakamoto. That's somebody else. And my background is my shitty laundry, just so you know.
Oh, we've known this whole time. We
I
didn't
love
want
it.
to.
It makes me so happy. I keep wanting to ask you, like, yo, what model of vacuum is that? Because that vacuum looks.
It's like some German model that my wife, she was really thrilled when we got it. So, you know, I'm not going to say buy your wife a really nice, you know, and like they're like happier to vacuum and stuff. Just saying, you might want to think about that. But yes, I do need a better background, and my apology for airing out my dirty laundry.
No, I love it.
That's funny. Sorry,
no, it's the best.
Funny.
The realness is awesome. I want to ask you something. Within the frame of everything that we've been talking about, what is the thing that the average person can do? Like, what would you challenge the average person, the pleb, to do to broaden their minds and expand their horizons? Whether it's like read this particular person or whatever the advice is, what do you think is the most effective thing that people can do?
I mean, in all honesty, there's going to be deep subjectivity based upon who the person is and how they exist in the world. You know, I think one of the biggest ones is just really follow the questions that you have in a meaningful way. Look to history and look to people that wrote about them. And then for those of you that, you know, really want to break out of the box, I'm a big fan of psychedelics. Like I think it provides a radical altering in worldview in a really powerful and meaningful way. And not just because like they're fun to get all wacky and stuff, but I very much believe that it allows for your mind to make new and different connections that could never be understood before. And then also, if you want to actually go even deeper, I think the possibility of an experience where you can have an ego death is really, really profound. Because in my opinion, like you actually get to directly touch and experience the nothing that is everything. And those kind of dumb statements make sense when you've really experienced that. And with that being said, I also want to emphasize like I hate the pejorative of calling them drugs because they're very, very safe substances. There's very little known. There's no known deaths. There are possibilities of some minor things happening, but for the most part, they're really safe. And it makes me really sad that so many people have pejoratively labeled them as drugs and put them in the same category as heroin, because for me personally, it really helped me deal with some of my own problems that I had with drinking too much. And it also really opened me up to the idea of spirituality. I was like a pretty staunch atheist before I started experimenting with psychedelics. And it really opened me up to the possibility that there's something to this world that I don't see or understand that I think is really important. So those would be kind of my two main recommendations. And yeah, I think a lot of it is just really being serious about asking questions of ourselves, you know? And I think that the action of being serious about it alone is really important. And that's something I get from Heidegger, because he's really big about, you know, asking the question of being. Like, what does it mean to be in our world? What does it mean for me to be Erik Cason living in my home in, you know, the year 2022 with the state of the world as it is? And I think the deep contemplation of those things can really flesh itself out in such a way that we can meet new and greater understandings, not only of ourselves, but of the
world. Love that, Erik. I hope that you and I get to meet in person, because I fucking love pot and shrooms. Literally the two greatest things in the world. They both come from the fucking earth, and there's no reason.
I feel like that like cheapened everything you just said. Like, yo, I love getting fucked up. Let's go.
No, but like, to be honest, like there's so much validity in what he said about
I completely agree. Yeah,
connecting the dots and the ego death. And like I'm very vocal. There is a pre-trip queue. And then my first psychedelic trip was winter break of my senior year of college. And
don't dox yourself, bro.
I'm a completely different human being. But I digress. Both shrooms and pot come from Earth. Nothing from Earth should be illegal. Just my 2 cents on that. Erik, of the trio that makes up Bitcoin Magazine Live, these 2 ugly faces up here, as well as the brains behind the operation, Chris, back there, one of us 3 is about to embark on a new life journey. Much like you, they're about to get married. I won't dox who, but what advice do you have for our esteemed colleague who's going to get married? Other than buying your wife a really nice vacuum.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I assume if you're marrying her, she like knows all of the crazy stuff that you believe about Bitcoin and other things. And I would say really enjoy it and honor your partner, and know that it is a difficult and tumultuous journey, but through your commitments to one another and willingness to be in dialogue, you can really get through anything, you know. And and I'd say allow for that love and cherishment to blossom out of yourself, and allow for it to humble yourself and to commit yourself to now you're no longer just you, but you're a unit that will hopefully grow into a larger unit, so that at one point in time you'll be, you know, the father of your children and the head of your household, and that you will lead your family in such a way. And for me, one of the things that really gives to me is, you know, I'm married and I have 2 kids, is that I have to participate in fixing money for my children, because I can't give them this world in the state it's in and be able to face them as adults in the future. Like, I have to be able to have a good explanation for what I was doing to try to make the world a better place now, so that when they are adults, even if I lose, they can be like, well, like, Dad fucked up, but like he was on the right path. But seeing how things are going with you guys, I actually hope they'll be like, wow, Dad, like, how did you guys know that, like, with the money being totally fucked, that like changing?
No. This is the best part. The story of the children in the future.
Yeah.
Oh, you cut out for 1 second.
You literally cut out the moment you tried to pretend to be your kids, and you said, Dad, how did you guys? And then it just, the Matrix was
remains,
like, nope.
That's what they want the mystery to be, you know. Yeah, for the most part, I just need to know that I am meaningfully trying to change the future. And to me, Bitcoin is the single most important way to do that.
Well said.
Erik, how can our audience stay up to date with your incredible writing, your incredible thoughts? I'm putting you on the spot and just saying, because of Gavin Newsom's hatred towards us and preventing you from joining us earlier, you got to come back. You've just got, you got to come back.
I'm so sorry. When the power went out, I was just like, mother F. So when my contractor came out and let me know the power was back on, I was literally struggling with pulling a giant generator out of the back of my truck to try to get it hooked up to try to make this happen. So, but yes, my apologies for my tardiness. We'll blame Gavin Newsom for the time being. And hopefully when we schedule this again, I will just have no power or my own backup generation to be able to do that. Just turned out my own light. It wasn't the power going out this time, thankfully. But yeah, you can find my writings at cryptosovereignty.org. I'm working with you guys at Bitcoin Magazine to get all of my articles and essays into a compilation and a book that I will be releasing. And because of all the inspiration and wonderful things that I've been shared and had people reach out to me and say, hey, keep going, I'm actually working on kind of my second book, which in my opinion really is dealing with the deeper metaphysical issues at hand, because to me this all runs headlong into the metaphysics of philosophy itself, and I feel like I've spent the last decade trying to figure that out, and it's really came together for me in the last 6 months. So I'm really excited about getting that out too.
Fantastic. I like to imagine that, as we've been talking about your power going out because of Gavin Newsom, in reality, it's like you've got some like Nikola Tesla, like mind body wireless power transmission system just outside of the window. And you're like, yes, Gavin Newsom. Meanwhile, there's like crazy electric fields, like crackling, and you're exploring the higher realms of consciousness. So
why are you doxing me, bro?
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. This was a pleasure, man. I really appreciate you for coming on. And yeah, thanks for giving us some insight into how you think and why you Bitcoin.
Thank you both very much, and continue your guys' excellent work as well. You guys have the bullhorn and are getting to the most plebs, so I appreciate your guys' work as well.
We do our best.
Before we cut to a commercial, though, and before we are joined by CK and Ansel for a new episode of Fed Watch, I want to remind everyone the tickets for Bitcoin Amsterdam are on sale. Ticket prices will be going up at the end of this week, so lock in your tickets right now before prices go up. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off and come join the biggest party in all of Europe in October 13th to 15th. No, 12th to 15th. All right, we're going to cut to a commercial, and then we're going to have a new episode of Fed Watch, so you're going to stop seeing our ugly mugs on the screen.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another exciting episode of Fed Watch. My name is Ansel Lindner, and I'm here with my co-host, CK. How are you doing, CK?
Doing good, Ansel. How you
Sorry,
doing, my
my
man?
dog.
What a time to be alive. You got a party over there.
Yeah, sorry. My kids just came home from school. The dog is barking. I'm having internet issues. My wife works from home too, so I can't reset the internet right now. And it is kind of crazy madhouse over here. But that's just like it is in the macro space, right? Everything is going crazy around the world.
It is a crazy madhouse. That is for sure. That is for sure. So, I mean, we're gonna get to it. Before we do, though, I gotta give a crazy nod. Just announced on Bitcoin Magazine's Twitter account, breaking: El Salvador's president to slam ruling financial elite and media in upcoming Bitcoin Magazine print exclusive. Stay tuned. So, pretty big news. A lot of people really hyped about the most recent issue of the Bitcoin Magazine, the censorship resistant issue, but coming very soon is the next issue with President Bukele slamming financial elite, as announced by Bitcoin Magazine today. So some pretty huge news right before we jumped on.
Is he going to name names from the IMF and the WEF and all those players?
I don't know the details. You know, they keep the exclusive stuff away from me, so this is news to me. But I mean, obviously, extremely exciting and absolutely huge. Also, in other housekeeping, Ansel and I are gonna go hang out for the first time for real. We shook hands a couple times, bye, but we're gonna hang out for real this Saturday at Bitcoin Day in Nashville. Ansel, I'm excited to get you over here. I'm excited to hang out. I'm excited to MC There's a bunch of really awesome talks. I know you're giving a great talk. Dylan LeClaire is giving a great talk. Robert Breedlove, just so many people. And like we mentioned on the show, an amazing speaker to audience member ratio. So you're going to be able to hang out with us just the same. So go to Bitcoin Day if you're in Nashville area. Use promo code BTCMAG10 to save yourself 10% off. Ansel, passing it to you. What do you want to say?
Yeah, I'm excited. So my talk is going to be a little fireside chat about macro from a contrarian perspective. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be, a lot of audience interaction, and I can't believe the guest list. I mean, or the speaker list. The speaker list is crazy. So if you guys have not bought your tickets, and you're in pretty much anywhere in the Midwest. I mean, I'm driving 9 hours in my old jalopy. So you guys can make it if you're within half a day's travel of Nashville. Recommend using that promo code and getting a ticket today. There's still some available. So excited, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. Gotta say, go to Bitcoin Amsterdam. That is coming up in a little bit more than a month as well. Promo code BM Live. Y'all, we got a lot to talk about. Speaking of Amsterdam and Europe, I mean, we're putting on an event in Europe. There's a lot to talk about there. I mean, I think you got some more charts to get to first, but back to you, Ansel.
Yeah, we'll be diving into the European energy crisis a little bit. Is it as bad as people say? We're going to take a look at some contrarian takes from Andreas Larson. I believe it's Larson from the Blockworks Macro with Macro Alf. He's been tweeting. So we're going to take a look at some of his tweets, and I invited him on, and he should be able to come on the show in the next couple of weeks. So we'll get his insider take over there from the European market. But we're going to go through a few charts, look at some energy, look at some currencies, and then the 20th Party Congress is coming up for China. And we've been talking a lot about China over the last year and a half, 2 years. And I thought we should just take a look at what this socialism, what is it? Socialism with Chinese characteristics. What is that all about? So I have an article that we're going to go through about China prior to Xi Jinping getting his unprecedented third term as premier. So yeah, jam-packed show. Should we jump into the charts?
Let's do it.
All right. Number one is
we also need
Bitcoin.
To make Chris FOMO into Bitcoin Day IO. We also need to get Chris to FOMO in. But Chris, come on down, man. Come hang out. All right. Sorry, Ansel.
Yeah, so we are here starting on Bitcoin as usual. And what was the word I used last week, Christian, to describe the chart? Do you remember that?
Wait, one more time?
What was the word I used last week to describe the Bitcoin chart?
Oh, flaccid.
Oh, man.
Flaccid.
Feel that way. There is no green pump in this chart whatsoever. But as you can see, this is not a logarithmic scale. I actually put it on normal scale. So these dips that have just happened seem a little bit smaller, but they, it does look like it's kind of flattening out, if you ask me. And the Bitcoin news cycle has been somewhat slow over the last few weeks. Macro has really taken off. So we're going to take a look at some of the macro things that could be affecting Bitcoin, or, maybe affecting Bitcoin in the next few months that could help Bitcoin turn around. So if you go to the next chart, is the stock market. This is the US stock market, and I've been talking about this Fibonacci retracement, and we're still holding on to that. And if you look at a live chart, actually, because I snapshotted this a couple hours ago, it's already pumped even more than this. So we'll see if we can challenge that 50-day moving average, the blue line, and really set that bottom in that golden pocket on the Fibonacci's. I've been talking about that Fibonacci retracement for a couple weeks now, and it seems to have hit. Again, I remain bullish on stocks for the rest of the year for multiple reasons that we've talked about here on the show. And we'll see if this bounce is for real. But we can look at the European stock market. So let's go to the next slide real quick. This is the German stock exchange, the DAX, and it looks definitely bearish. If you go back one slide and then back to this one, you can kind of see the difference between this one is a little bit more bullish, obviously, than the German one. So go back to the German one, please. So then, yeah, it just looks bearish. But it does look like there is some time left. And all the talk has been about winter, right? Is winter actually going to be super cold? Get a bad winter and that's going to be really bad for Europe, or is it going to be a mild winter and it's less bad? Well, this chart kind of says, well, looks like we do have until November to come to a decision point on stocks in Europe. So any comments on those before I jump into the dollar?
It'll be really interesting to see a scenario where Bitcoin is tanking and US stocks are pumping. But I'm starting to think that as much as we love Bitcoin, in the eyes of many, it is still a speculative store of value and speculative future utility. I think a lot of us, we see the details, we see the growing utility, we are excited about it. But to the eyes of many, stocks, real estate, a lot of these other things, they're just more comfortable with it. And I think, hey, that sucks that Bitcoin isn't there yet, but that's Bitcoin's future. That's the way that Bitcoin will, work with society when there's times of chaos or fear or change. Bitcoin will be that trusted store of value that people find in other assets today.
Yeah, but you can't do international settlement with real estate, right? I mean,
no, I agree. The real utility will continue to set it apart, but in this moment, in the fear right now, Bitcoin is a very liquid thing to dump, right? And I just don't know when the mental psychology completely flips, gradually then suddenly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I do see that. Well, from my vantage point, watching Bitcoin news cycle, because I write my newsletter every Friday. It's actually switching to Monday after 200 issues of the fundamentals report. I'm switching it to Mondays, but I've noticed that the news cycle has slowed down. There doesn't seem to be any like huge amount of supply coming on the market to dump. It is just smaller fish. I can't hold on through this. I'm getting too bearish, and they're dumping a little bit of their stack. So I don't see a huge amount of supply coming on. All I see out there on the horizon, at least, is potential huge demand from people like BlackRock, Fidelity, Vanguard, all of those players. Also nation states. I mean, not just El Salvador, but Russia now is re-engaging with the idea. They're starting to use other currencies in settlement with China. So it would work if they said, hey, Bitcoin is one of those settlement currencies. So there is all this potential demand out there, and I don't see as much potential supply, but that's just me. A permeable, I guess you could say.
I am as bullish as you can get. I'm on the record of calling out Bitcoiners for not being bullish enough, but I do like to talk about the market dynamics that I sense when talking to people. I really do take the anecdotal information I get from my conversations with Bitcoiners, and people that I meet in just real life, and I try to let that inform my analysis. Of course, I also like to get the big picture macro, and obviously there's this avalanche of demand that's coming, but when that is going to come, that's where I think it's always good to try to take some heuristic data points as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here, because this has a lot to do with this, is the strong dollar. So Chris, if you could go to number 4, please. This is taking a look
ahead of us. What a killer.
I'm still showing us being on the DAX.
Yeah, sorry. Which chart again? Chart
number 4? Yeah. Slide number 4, please, Chris. Anyway, I'll just talk to it here. We have it's the update to the chart that I showed last week with the DXY and the broad trade weighted dollar. I kind of feel like I'm turning the dollar moderate here. I was a dollar bull for a very long time before it was cool, I guess, before anybody was talking about it. And now I'm kind of like, whoa, wait a second. Now the DXY is blowing out, not because necessarily the dollar is strengthening for the monetary reasons that I noted back in the day. I said, there's deflationary pressure. There's going to be a dollar shortage, et cetera, et cetera. I think right now, the thing is people are dumping the euro and they're dumping the yen. So that's why the DXY is really blowing out. Where when you look at the broad trade weighted dollar, yeah, it's just hit another local high, but it's still below its COVID crash peak. So the main strength of the dollar is coming from the weakness in the euro and the yen. And I did not include the yen chart, but the yen did hit 145. So it sold off down to 145 against the dollar. And also the 10-year JGB, or the Japanese government bond, that's the one that they try to peg, right, between negative 0.5% and positive 0.5%. Well, it just went back above 0.5%. So now what they're having to do is sell yen and buy the 10-year JGB to push that yield back down. So they're dumping yen onto the market to try to contain their yields, and the yen is just, crashing. So those are the updates I have for that. Also, Chris, are you there? Can we go to slide number 8?
Chris is always there, Ansel. Never fear.
Am I frozen? Because I can't see the charts going.
We're on it. We're on it. You are
We're on it.
frozen.
I am frozen. Okay. Well, the number 8 is the U.S. oil. This is the WTI oil, but it's also the European oil, or the Brent crude looks very similar to this. We broke down to new lows again. This chart is only showing, I think it's 83 on this chart. I'm not seeing it. I must be frozen, but I saw it as low as 82 right now. So the oil price continues to go down, and it's like a really weird thing. How could this, we're supposed to be having this energy crisis. We're supposed to be having all this inflation, but oil keeps dropping. It doesn't make any sense. If you go to the next slide, number 9, that's the gasoline futures, and they're falling as well. This is U.S. gasoline futures, but if you go to if you take a look at the European gasoline futures, like in Rotterdam futures contracts or whatever, I don't have a slide for that, but it's very similar. They continue to fall. So it's very weird. There's something weird going on here where people are extremely, extremely bearish right now, but the charts really aren't playing that out. So Christian, do you have any thoughts on that before we go to the Andreas tweets?
I mean, I'm still trying to put the puzzle pieces together myself, so I don't have any good insight to add. Be very interested to hear what Andreas is saying, but on one end, you're hearing crisis with the natural gas situation and other sort of energy in Europe, and on the other hand, gasoline futures are tanking. So I guess not all energy is created equal, but would love to continue diving into it.
Okay, so if we go to slide number 5, that is the first one from Andreas, and he's been pointing out the energy situation for many months, almost a year here. So he says in this tweet, this is slide number 5. For those claiming that I have not been on top of this energy crisis, here is a full-blown warning from October 2021 on what was coming. Now I am fading the energy crisis, but I simply cannot accept being labeled as not having been on top of it early. So he's starting to feel the same way I am feeling about calling a strong dollar. Yeah, calling a strong dollar. But now everybody seems to be more bullish on the dollar than I am. So if you go to the slide number 6, let's get into this thread here. He's had some myths that he was debunking about this energy crisis. So I wanted to go through this.
We're on it.
Okay. All right. Myth number 1, Russia can't sell the gas to India and China. Oh, sorry. Russia can just sell the gas to India and China. No, roughly 40 out of 250 billion cubic meters are exported as LNG, but there are no pipelines from the huge fields north of Murmansk to anywhere else than Europe. It will take years for Russia to redirect flows. And this is one thing I said early on in the crisis, that Russia was going to have to deal with this because there's no way that they could actually send this stuff to China. They have to put it onto ships and send it around the world, right? And that's not at all a substitute for these pipelines. The industry is set up for pipelines. It's not easy for them just to load it onto these big container, the LNG ships, if they can even get some, and send it around to China. So all of this stuff about China buying up the excess or India buying up the excess, that is totally false. That's not happening. Also, I was going to say something else about this chart. Oh, they said that I read elsewhere that to build these pipelines, even if they could build the pipelines and connect the infrastructure, they need these big compressor engines along the pipeline to push, all the liquid natural gas and oil through these pipelines. But Russia and China don't make those compressors. They're made by Siemens or, made by German companies. So even if they could build the pipelines in, say, a year or two, they wouldn't be able to get these compressors unless they got them from the West. So globalization is totally interconnected, and you can't just say, oh, Russia can export to anybody. There, like, I hear all these pundits out there saying, oh, commodities are over, like Zoltan, like we talked about last week. Commodities, the future is commodities, not finance. Well, everything's interconnected. They can't just export raw materials without getting financing. It's kind of crazy. So that's the first myth. Stop me whenever you want to jump in here, Christian. So the second myth is the ruble is strong. No, the ruble is currently a one-sided trade as imports to Russia have disappeared. There is a huge discrepancy between Russia's reported imports and the export numbers published by their former trade partners. Okay, so also I've been saying that Russian CPI, or their quote unquote inflation rate, was 18% for most of this year. Well, where Europe's was 8-9%. Now it's 10% plus or minus, but it's still not as high as Russia's inflation rate. It's just that Russia's used to that kind of high inflation, right? The ruble that you see traded is a very, very tiny market and really doesn't represent the strength of the ruble whatsoever. Okay, next slide. This is myth number 3 here. German gas flows will go to zero. No, German gas flows are not going to zero. Germany has other suppliers, and 0% flows from Russia will likely only lead German gas flows back to 2015 levels. Is that bad? Sure, it's really bad. Is it outright catastrophe? Probably not. So that puts it in perspective as well. The Russian share of European natural gas was, I think, like 40% before this crisis. So the flows aren't going to zero. Yeah, it's cutting it back 40%, but it's not going to zero like a lot of people are claiming out there. Now, Germany is going to be hit harder than other European countries because they have industry like the chemical industry that they get from refining natural gas. And so that will be hit very hard as well, but it's not going to zero. Okay, that's just a very important thing that we need to realize. All right, myth number 4, I believe, is Russia can resell gas to Europe via China. Nah, China just bought 2.35 million metric tons of LNG from Russia in the first half of the year. Europe bought more than 70 million tons of LNG in 2021. So on a good day, Russian reselling of liquid natural gas via China will make up 5% of Europe's LNG imports. That's peanuts. So once again, people are talking about China is going to benefit from this. China is doing everything right. China is so strong, in Russia, they're doing, they have the upper hand, kind of, but it's almost like they're 4 to 6 months behind where Europe is. They're just hoping that Europe can't hold on through the winter, right? That's where we're at right now. So then Andreas concludes, is Europe stuck in a mess? Yes. Is Russia stuck in a mess? Yes. Who wins this game of chicken? It very much depends on decisions taken by politicians in Europe. I don't hold high hopes, but I have seen moves in the right direction in recent weeks. I haven't really seen that. I think they kind of are doubling down, but we have reported here on the show about the sanctions, and I read them, the update on the sanctions from the Financial Times, which is supposed to be a reputable source, so for instance, the UK was supposed to sanction insurance of these tankers. and all these exports of wheat and all that from Russia. Well, they only applied those sanctions to the UK itself. So the UK companies will still insure all these tankers and stuff going around the world, just not to the UK. So that really was hard, tough talk, but they didn't deliver. Also, the European sanctions, remember, they said the European companies couldn't do direct business with Russia, but they could do business with a third party, right? So there could just be a third, like a Indian company as third party, or an Iranian company or whatever as third party, and it would just go through them like that. So yeah, I do see that maybe in the headlines, it's like, whoa, it's so crazy. It's the end of Europe as we know it. But in the background, maybe they are working things out a little bit. So that's what I got, Christian. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really, really interesting to kind of just see like the pendulum swing on sentiment and how it like tends towards like extremes before readjusting. I think that's one of the things we pride ourselves on the show most about, is trying to kind of like get ahead of that. One is like point the listeners in the right direction before that happens, and then also like when we start changing directions, to be honest about it. So these are things that were known about the energy situation as well, like that it would be difficult for Russia to deal with it. It's also very difficult to, like, once you are producing natural gas, it's really hard to stop. So if you're not like selling it, it's hard. And then when you stop, it's really hard to get started. So any of these moves is like they're making decisions out for months and years, right? And that can cost millions and billions for economies in both directions. So it's a very, very tricky situation. And then lastly, him concluding that the solutions will have to be political. And from Europe, man, it's what a mess. I would not want to, we're trying to get to a world where we're less reliant on politicians, but here we are, and more reliant than we ever were, especially in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it takes years or whatever to get these rigs back going again, to get the infrastructure set up. And it's the same with companies in, say, Germany, right, that shut their doors because they don't have access to not the electricity is too expensive. Plus, they don't even have access to their raw materials. So that will take years to get over that economic damage that they're doing to themselves. So that's what I have for Europe. Are we ready to jump into China?
Well, I mean, before we close it out, like, I guess the UK isn't quite Europe, but the new prime minister of the UK is talking about like insane subsidies and price caps and annual payment caps per household, and taking big energy profits and reinvesting it into individuals, like massive, massive socialization efforts. The very following day, the president of the ECB talks about we're all in it together to curb energy uses at peak times and to like fight through this, and really trying to coordinate, around things like that. And we're already seeing countries committing to being a part of this action. I know part of it is to bunker down and get ready for a difficult winter, high prices, etc. But it seems to me like their solution to market issues is government mandated, almost like curveballs at the market. So definitely something to consider as well.
Yeah, I had a tweet just yesterday, I believe, where I was saying that they're technocrats, so they see all problems like a technocrat. It's all a management problem. Any problem that their people have and their economy has, it's a challenge to their management ability. If you just read like the WEF, every single like main word in all their sentences is all about management, right? So they are technocrats through and through, Marxist technocrats, but they look at everything as, oh, we can manage this. And we saw this in COVID. I mean, we're seeing the exact same rhetoric with von der Leyen, the president.
And the curve, same exact rhetoric.
Same exact rhetoric. It's crazy, man. All right, so let's jump into the Marxism stuff from China. We've just talked about the Marxist technocrats in Europe. So now let's go
Marxists
over to China.
everywhere.
Marxists everywhere. So if you can go to slide number 10, please. I can't see if we're up because my internet's frozen, but
We're up, sir.
all right. This is just an article. I read it on my live stream. So I do live streams on Telegram. I've started simulcasting them onto Twitter Spaces. So you guys can make sure you're following me at Ansel Lindner on Twitter, and the Spaces will come up. There's a few hiccups. The Twitter doesn't work very well. Twitter Spaces on my phone. So, I'm still trying to work through some issues, but we went through this article, and because someone pointed out to me on my Telegram, they said, China's not really communist. And I was like, are you serious? So I had to pull up this article and I started reading it. And that's why I just wanted to read a few highlights from you guys. So if we go to the slide number 11, on the bicentennial of Marx's birthday last May. So this is an article from 2018. So that was the bicentennial of Marx's birthday last May. President Xi Jinping called on members of the Chinese Communist Party to return to the study of the socialist sage. Quote, "We commemorate Marx in order to pay tribute to the greatest thinker in the history of mankind," Xi said, "and also to declare our firm belief in the scientific truth of Marxism," end quote. Party members are required to study selections of Marx's work, particularly the Communist Manifesto. The public gets its dose as well, among other things, via a television talk show named Marx Got It Right. The renewed embrace of Marxism has also been a key element in the rollout of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era. That's a long term, which was added to China's constitution following last year's 19th Communist Party Congress. So we're coming up on the 20th Party Congress now. Xi Jinping is supposed to be getting his unprecedented third term as premier, and they added his Xi's Communist Manifesto to the country's constitution. So this is definitely a Marxist country. Okay, let's continue to number 12, slide number 12. Mao put China in the middle of a world revolution to liberate the laboring masses and put the party at the core of every activity in China. Mao's ideological state welded Chinese society together as the People's Republic of China, but at a terrible cost in blood and treasure. After the death of Mao in the mid-1970s, Deng Xiaoping appeared to break with this internationalist tradition by creating, quote, socialism with Chinese characteristics, end quote, a new policy that put economic growth ahead of revolution. And that's what everyone talks about. Oh, they changed. They're not communists anymore. They changed to capitalists now. But let's read on. This was a reaction to Mao's Cultural Revolution, when ideology was taken to absurd extremes and plunged China into 10 years of political chaos. But Deng did not mean to abandon ideology, only to set it aside while developing the nation as fast as possible. Deng's choice to prioritize economic development over ideological conformity worked so well that socialist ideology could not keep up with the market society that emerged. So I've said this other times on the show, that for a communist revolution, communists actually believe in capitalism, but they believe capitalism is a phase in the revolution. So first the capitalism will deplete itself, and then the communists take over. Well, Deng Xiaoping realized that there was no capitalist phase, so let's open up and have a capitalist phase so that we can then have a second communist revolution. All right, going to slide number 13. Economic success produced its own contradictions. China has become a pluralist society that Mao Zedong could not have imagined, although not one that embraces a diversity of political or cultural views. First, television, then the internet brought the world to China, despite pervasive censorship. Globalization brought foreign tourists, students, and business people to China in huge numbers, and sent Chinese abroad to study, travel, and trade. Relaxations of the Hukou, that's the internal passport system, allowed hundreds of millions of peasants to migrate to the cities for work. By 2000, China had its share of globe-trotting capitalists, alienated intellectuals, internet-addicted teenagers, scrappy entrepreneurs, and forgotten masses. By 2012, when Xi Jinping came to power, the party was afraid that this was getting out of control. A truly ideological regime cannot embrace pluralism without admitting the possibility of competition and eventual replacement. Christian, you can stop me anytime, but I got 2 more slides or 3 more slides.
Oh man, it's fascinating. It's just like, I feel like we've been talking about this, but it's great to, get it directly from Xi's writing, not too long ago, pre-crisis too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and coming up, we have an expert from China, and he is translating Xi Jinping thought for us. So let's read on. Xi Jinping and the CCP have responded to the increasing social and intellectual pluralism that China's economic development and engagement with the world have produced with a renewed commitment to Marxism. This state Marxism is the necessary software that enables China's Leninist state to survive and to deliver on its promises today, making China Marxist again, they believe. So I think that's a play. This was written in 2018, and I think that's a play on words from, the Trump Make America Great Again. So they say making China Marxist again, they believe, will ensure that the CCP continues to determine the content and direction of China's rejuvenation to the status of world power abroad and prosperous civilized society at home. This is Xi Jinping's China Dream, the nationalist slogan he coined that can now be found on billboards throughout the country. Next slide. One such apologist for Xi is Zhang Shigong, a law professor at Beijing University. In a recent article that drew a lot of attention in China, Zhang sought to systemize Xi Jinping thought. His argument is basically historical, providing a new periodization of modern and contemporary Chinese thought that restores the party to its central role. China stood up under Mao Zedong, got rich under Deng Xiaoping, and is becoming powerful under Xi Jinping. This seemingly simple formula, in fact, accomplishes a number of key objectives. First, it refutes the commonly held view that the history of the first 60 years of the People's Republic should be seen as divided between 30 years of failure, Maoism, and 30 years of success, reform and opening, by arguing that Mao restored the sovereignty necessary to China's material progress in a globalized world under Deng. Similarly, Deng's reforms not only are not to be criticized for promoting capitalism, he simply allowed the material base for China's rejuvenation to develop. Zhang's argument thus makes China's modern and contemporary history whole and continuous. Second, Zhang identifies great men with great accomplishments, thus striking a symbolic blow against pluralism and carving out a space for Xi Jinping, his thought, and possible lifelong tenure. So they're talking about lifelong tenure back in 2018, way before this party Congress comes up. And third, Zhang makes a robust case for the centrality of Marxism after years of tired efforts to salvage it. And then one more paragraph here, guys. Zhang's argument requires a certain ledger domain, and that means like hand tricks or tricky sleight of hand. That's what I'm looking for, which leaves Marxism transformed. Zhang argues, as did Mao Zedong, that Marxism's truth is not timeless, but must evolve. That Marxism's truths are not timeless, but must evolve with society. Class struggle was appropriate under Mao, given China's social conditions, but not now. The ideological relaxation announced by socialism with Chinese characteristics under Deng Xiaoping worked because by then China required, above all, the development of its material base. At present, however, China has become a well-off society that provides for the needs of its people, and Marxism requires modification to catch up with the developments of China's economy. Agreeing with New Confucians, okay, I'll just stop there. I want to point out that cultural Marxism that we hear from in the United States, I listen to a lot of James Lindsay's stuff. He's an expert on cultural Marxism, and they constantly are messing with the language. They're constantly messing with history, rewriting history as some narrative that gets them to the promised land of, cultural Marxism utopia. And that's exactly what China has done. Okay. So if people think that China is going to be successful, they have to believe that that communism works, and that they are somehow have the right formula for central planning. And that's all for that, Christian. What do you have to say?
I mean, we've been talking about this, which is like China and Chinese government and Chinese officials, they're doing very unprecedented things in terms of that no capitalistic country would do in any way, which is like huge curbs on some of its kind of key and fastest growing industry, both on the consumer side, preventing people from participating in video games and things like that, but also from the organizational side with massive socializations of companies, with the disappearing of key leaders and CEOs and executives, discussed in there as like rogue entrepreneurs. But ultimately, we're kind of almost seeing like this like clawback of communist intentions and communist why am I blanking on the word? But just like behavior and
Central planning.
And it's the opposite of kind of what made China globally relevant. So now that they're kind of moving away and they're moving back towards what made them globally irrelevant, plunged them into 10 years of darkness, as they say. It's going to be very interesting to see how they get to compete in a world that is less globalized and where not everyone is jumping on the communist bandwagon. So we're seeing Europe definitely doing things to slash industry and to socialize and to bring down control. We're seeing that happen in China, but we're definitely seeing free markets trying to reign in elsewhere. And it's just going to be very interesting that maybe it's like Cold War 2.0, but I just don't think that these two economic ideologies can live together.
Correct. And that's part of the deglobalization. Perhaps China will be able to survive, or the CCP will be able to survive in a regional hegemony, but they're not going to be this global the days of the global hegemon are now over. The days of a global dollar system, I believe, is over. And that's where I like to tie in Bitcoin. I probably sound like a broken record saying this, but between these regional multipolar world, there's not going to be a lot of trade because there's not going to be a lot of trust. Zoltan Posnar, we went through his stuff last week, and he said the same thing, that when trust breaks down, the system breaks down, globalization breaks down, trade breaks down. Well, that is where you need hard money, where you need sound money to trade between that, because you don't need trust with Bitcoin. It's a trustless system. You just send it and you receive $1 billion worth of Bitcoin in 10 minutes, right? So that is how Bitcoin, I think that it's a beautiful theory. It is a theory, but it's beautiful that this system is going to break down and Bitcoin is just going to be able to slide into being this reserve, this global reserve. So yeah, that's all the new stuff I have today. I was hoping maybe to take questions from the audience. What do you think about that? Or do you have anything to add to that, Christian?
Well, yeah, I would say if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitch, if you're watching on Rumble, please throw in your comments. We are watching comments here. We can respond to them. And yeah, I mean, again, when you hear people saying that the US is going down and China is this new rising power, this idea that's talked about a lot is Triffin's paradox. And we even see the likes of Ray Dalio talking about that. I think Ansel has frequently made points that very accurately and facts-based show why, if you believe that markets matter and markets will lead to the end result, that you can't possibly believe that China and the direction that it is going can compete. So there's a paradox there. I agree. I think the true market technology, the true market force that is now emerging as the US dollar system is declining is Bitcoin, not China. And honestly, like,
Yeah.
For the globe, Bitcoin might be the most out of left field thing that possibly could have happened, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure that the CCP 20 years ago, in on their bingo card of what could ruin our rise and bringing global communism to the world, they did not see, distributed ledger technology, proof of work, and Bitcoin as being the things that would take down and foil their plans. And even still, I don't think that their plans would have worked, because communism, central planning, does not work in the face of markets. That's it. That's my opinion. So, Ansel, I don't know what else you want to add here. Haven't seen any good questions come up in the chat, but yeah, bearish on China just because I'm bullish on markets, baby.
Yeah, that was a great point about Bitcoin being, because all these gold bugs for years, and a lot of I would say maybe anti-US pundits, macro pundits, they say the end of the dollar system is nigh, and all of this stuff. Well, I do agree with that to a certain degree, but it's not going to be replaced by China, just like you said. That system is never going to take over as global reserve currency. We see it in all the statistics. If you look at international transactions, China has like 1 or 2%. The Chinese renminbi has like 1 or 2%. And most of that is with Hong Kong, which they consider an international transaction. So that's not the Chinese yuan is not going to become any sort of global reserve currency. Same with the ruble. It's just way too small. And look at the euro. We all know that the euro is headed to break up sooner rather than later, probably at this rate. So, the only option out there is the dollar until Bitcoin came. Now Bitcoin is this thing that everybody's been waiting for to take down the dollar. And I've been saying that for years, that the end game of this is Bitcoin versus the dollar. And maybe we'll see that in the next 5-10 years.
I 100% agree. We had a question about what tools are needed for that future. I don't think that it's crazy to think that you need Bitcoin. You need things to make you more anti-fragile, more self-sovereign, and that's it. Like, you don't need any crazy thing that hasn't been invented yet. So just try to fortify yourself. Try to make yourself anti-fragile. Ansel,
what was the question?
What tools do we need other than Bitcoin to make it to a new system?
The internet, that would help us. I mean, use a VPN, get your local supply chains for your own family and your own stuff locked down. Try to buy local as much as you can, support local manufacturing, local business of all sorts. That's what I would recommend. So those would be the tools you need to make yourself a little bit more resilient against any sort of volatility in the future. Yeah.
Buy Bitcoin, obviously.
Buy Bitcoin, of course.
Don't trust anyone. And it's easy to not trust anyone with Bitcoin. It's never been easier. The UX keeps getting better. So just learn about Bitcoin too. And yeah, Ansel, let's wrap. Y'all can find me at CK_Snarks. You can find me at Bitcoin Amsterdam. You can find me at Bitcoin Day in Nashville this Saturday. And yeah, excited to come back next week. At the end of this month, we have another guest, David Lawton from Bitwise. So a lot of folks coming onto the show. We obviously bring you Ansel's Alpha here, but we're also going to bring you some of the best guests in the space alongside everyone over at Bitcoin Magazine Live. Ansel,
absolutely.
Pass it over to you. Give us a wrap.
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Ansel Lindner. Also, the Telegram group is t.me/Bitcoin and Markets. And sign up for the newsletter at bitcoinandmarkets.com. That's it, guys. Thanks, everybody, for joining.